Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto is injected with Akatsuki DNA part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Orochimaru was a patient man. In order to be a good scientist, you had to be. It takes a while to get experimental results. And you always had to prepare for the unexpected, like that old fool Sarutobi barging into one of his labs, forcing him to leave Konoha. He had been prepared that night. Everything of importance was sealed up in scrolls, which were sealed up in a single scroll he had hid beneath his clothing. A bit risky, but the only ones alive in the village of Konoha who could actually get in a hit that might damage the scroll were Jiraiya, Tsunade, and Sarutobi. The first two weren't there, and his old sensei wouldn't attack him. Orochimaru knew him too well for that. It was a shame that infants with the Shodame's genes hadn't lived, but that had been a minor setback. Leaving Konoha was not much of a loss either. He'd been toying with the idea anyways. The village had been useful, but for Orochimaru's quest for immortality, there was nothing else Orochimaru could squeeze out of it, not counting experimental subjects, but those could be found anywhere else. He currently had an immortality jutsu that allowed his soul to take over other bodies, but it was untested and also not really immortality, as there was still a threat of being lethally injured and unable to find a new host. So Orochimaru had left, seeking another place where he might find the answers to eternal life. And he found it. He had been approached by an organization known as the Akatsuki, a group of S-class ninja, much like himself. Their goals were a bit strange. All Orochimaru knew that they fought devils, fiends and other hellish critters, which were still swarming the planet. They normally moved in groups of 2, there were regular pairs that normally wandered together, and special occasions where different pairs or even groups would be sent against a particularly strong foe. But Orochimaru wasn't really interested in the organization's goals or setup. The members took too much of his attention. Within them lay the answers he had yearned for such a long time. There was Haiden, an immortal in a literal sense, as Orochimaru had witnessed a fiend similar to a praying mantis had decapitated him, only for the head to start swearing about neck pain. Orochimaru had heard of the near-extinct Order of Jashin, and that its members could reflect the injuries they suffered to their enemies after going through a secret ceremony, but never had he heard that they didn't die with their victims. In their belief, they destroyed their souls in order to send Jashin the ultimate tribute, the soul of their foe. Well, destroyed was not quite correct, seeing that souls were indestructible, but they were shattered, denying them entrance to heaven or hell until they reformed. Once that happened, they were reborn without a trace of who they once were, as the law of gods commanded. The only problem Orochimaru saw was that once the head was severed, Haiden lost control of his body. Also, Orochimaru didn't know if the man was truly immortal, or just immune to a forceful death. The next member, Kakuzu, would solve that problem. He was Haiden's opposite. While technically mortal, he extended his life by ripping out others' hearts, allowing him to use their strengths, as well as add their life to his own. Orochimaru had no idea how old Kakuzu was, but the man had hinted that he'd fought the Shodame Hokage. If Orochimaru could combine the powers of these two men, he'd have his immortality. But Orochimaru was greedy, so why settle for second best when you had a chance to gain perfection? The other member's ability would be a magnificent addition, truly creating the perfect body. His own regular partner was Akasuna no Sasori, or Sasori of the Red Sands. The two of them disliked each other, but respected the other one's skills and actually worked well together. Orochimaru was interested in human puppets, as it would give him an edge. However, he felt that he had better things to do than learn puppetry, not that that meant he wouldn't like his perfect body to be able to use fallen enemies as weapons. Another member that intrigued Orochimaru especially was Kisame Hashigaki. Or more precisely, his sword Samahada. The sword could instantly devour chakra, and not only the limited amounts humans possessed. Orochimaru had seen Kisame shave all demonic and highly toxic Yuki off a fiend on the level of the Sanbai, without any ill effects on the sword. Unfortunately, the damned blade was at least semi-sentient, and refused to let anyone but Kisame wield it. The woman, Konan, did not interest him that much, but he saw the advantages in being able to turn into paper. It would give the expression being overwhelmed by paperwork a whole new meaning, plus nobody expected an attack to come from a pile of blank paper. And the idea was brilliant, Orochimaru would admit that much. Of course, the leader's Rinnegan made Orochimaru's mouth water. The first of the Dijutsu, and the most powerful of them all. However, Orochimaru doubted he'd get close enough for a transfer, not that it'd do him much good. Pain wasn't immortal. Still, his skills in an immortal body would grant Orochimaru the strength of a god. As for the last member, Orochimaru wasn't sure what to make of him. Zetsu was an enigma. All Orochimaru knew about him was that he could freely pass through solid objects, and cover great distances in seconds. Orochimaru had tried to copy that skill, but the results were moderate at best. Still, He was sure that Setsu could do a lot more than he'd shown. Orochimaru decided that he'd try to get samples from them, while biding his time in hopes that other shinobi would join, so that he may gain more samples. And slowly and patiently, Orochimaru collected his samples. Ironically, the one sample he desired the most was the easiest to acquire, as Haiden left gallons of his genetic material whenever he fought or prayed to his god. For the other samples, Orochimaru had to use cunning. Orochimaru looked at Kakuzu with calculating eyes. The man seemed annoyed. "Why did you call me, Orochimaru?" Said Serpent smirked. "I have something for you." He raised a golden wristband with embedded diamonds into the air. Kakuzu's eyes widened slightly, then his left arm detached and shot forward, black strings connecting it with the main body. Orochimaru reacted instantly, pulling out his kusanagi and chopping the limb off with a single sweep. Kakuzu looked at him. "Are you trying to test my patience?" he asked, obviously annoyed. Orochimaru shook his head. Now, I never said it was for free. In return, I want some information. I heard rumors about an elemental bloodline in Teikakure, and as a former shinobi of that village, you should know." Kakuzu frowned. It was no secret that Orochimaru was interested in bloodlines, but to go this far? Then again, who was he to complain? "All right, give me the good and I will tell you what I know." Orochimaru raised a brow. "How do I know you won't just run off with this? It is pretty expensive." Kakuzu looked at him. "If I started to betray my business partners, the news would spread and nobody would do money-related deals with me." Orochimaru tilted his head, seemingly weighing his options, then he threw the wristband to Kakuzu. Said man pulled out a small magnifying glass that was placed on the eye, the likes every jewel dealer used, and started to look at every single stone. Finally, he nodded. "This is real. To answer your question, there is no such bloodline in Taki, and there has never been an elemental bloodline user serving Take in its entire history." With that, he shined away. Orochimaru waited a while, then he smiled. I know. He had been the one spreading that rumor, and it had served its purpose. He bended down to pick up a number of severed black strings. Amongst what Kakuzu had sent with his arm, there had been a number of loose strings, some of which Orochimaru now collected and sealed in a scroll. With that, the necessary materials were gathered, now for the supplemental ones. Orochimaru had paid a visit to Amigakure, Akatsuki's headquarters after Pain had killed Hanzo. Orochimaru had come to secure the corpse, which he managed, and look for the salamander contract. He had found that one as well, but it didn't do him any good. The paranoid ruler of AIM had sealed it into a tattoo on his arm, with a seal that required the man's own chakra to work. Still, having Hanzo's corpse could only be good, as it probably held a few secrets for Orochimaru to uncover. Sadly, the man didn't have a Kekkai Genkai, only ridiculous amounts of skill. The man had shown that he was a master in manipulating fire, water and lightning, and that he had been a brilliant strategist. Right now he was on his way back, but he was biding his time. Then he heard what he'd been waiting for, the flapping of tiny wings. He spun around and released a salve of saban that nailed the paper butterflies to a nearby tree. Orochimaru plucked them off the needles, then unceremoniously ripped them to shreds, although he sealed a few larger pieces into a scroll. He didn't have to wait long until Konan, the angel of AIM, appeared. She got straight to the point. "Why did you do that?" Orochimaru chuckled. "Kukuku, while I enjoy spying on people to learn their secrets, I hate being spied on." Konan looked him in the eye, then she slowly nodded. "Don't do it again. I have no idea why you want Hanzo's body, but be careful not to overstep your bounds." With that, she turned to paper and blew away. Orochimaru shrugged. That was one. Orochimaru looked at the floor. A giant open Venus flytrap was in front of him, a man's head and shoulders were sticking out of it, one part of him white as snow, the other one black as the night. This was Zetsu, spy and messenger of the Akatsuki, and he had just given him and Sasori their instructions. Orochimaru smiled and ruffled through Zetsu's hair. "You are quite useful, aren't you?" Then he quickly pulled his hand back, and not a second too soon. The flytrap snapped shut, sounding like a triggered bear trap, missing Orochimaru's finger by a hair's width. Then the two parts opened again, revealing an annoyed face. "Don't pat my head." Orochimaru shrugged. "Won't happen again." Then he and Sasori left as Zetsu sank into the ground. Orochimaru looked at his hand. A few strands of hair were in between his fingers. That was two. Orochimaru and Sasori were in the hardest fight they had had for a long time. Zetsu had completely underestimated the threat this guy posed. While their foe looked like an overgrown mix between a gecko, a rodent and a bull, it could manipulate the earth beneath their feet, making a fight difficult due to permanent loss of footing. Also, the damned beast sent spikes through the ground every now and then, trying to target their blind spots. Sasori was still in what Orochimaru was certain was a carrier puppet, considering he hadn't used a single puppet yet, and having a harder time to dodge. Eventually, the inevitable happened. Sasori took a hit. The strike had been a nasty one, coming directly from below. Sasori had no way of seeing it, and it pierced through the entire body, shooting out of the top of Sasori's body. As Orochimaru had expected, a figure shot out from Sasori's back. Orochimaru saw the true Sasori, what looked like a young man with red hair. Orochimaru was intrigued. From his information, Sasori should be older than that by now. Did the man find his own way of eternal youth, or did he simply have a baby face? Sasori spoke. Damn, he nicked me. And of all the possible places, it had to be there. Orochimaru noticed he was holding his chest, a purplish liquid flowing out between Sasori's fingers, dripping onto a rock on the floor. Orochimaru smirked. Looks like everyone doesn't bleed red after all. Sasori glanced at him. Orochimaru, be quiet. This has gone on long enough, it's time for me to end this. He looked at the fiend. You have taken up too much of my valuable time already. But since you grazed me, you will die by my favorite puppet. He pulled out and opened a scroll that had the kanji for 3 in it. With a poof, a man that Orochimaru easily recognized was leaning on Sasori's shoulders. The Sandaime Kazekage, the most powerful leader Suna had ever had, was now one of Sasori's weapons. Then the puppet opened its mouth, and a black substance oozed out. Orochimaru knew that this was not some sort of blob, but countless metal particles, and if he knew Sasori, the entire thing was poisoned. The poor critter didn't stand the ghost of a chance. Suddenly, instead of the earth, it was standing on a black platform that bound its limbs, tail, and made a choker around its neck while lifting it into the air. With a short tug, the creature was hugging the square platform. All limbs, tail included, were stretched out, pointing away from its body. Then a large block of the black sand appeared above it. Sasori's finger twitched and the 2 black squares shot towards each other, squashing the gecko/rodent/bull in between them like a mosquito between 2 hands. Orochimaru walked over to the rock where Sasori's purple blood had pooled and dipped his fingers in the puddle, not without secretly pulling out a syringe and sucking up as much of it as he could. And I thought that between the 2 of us, I was the one who was into self-experimentation. Sasori looked at him. You don't have a monopoly on intelligence and willingness to sacrifice oneself for his work. Orochimaru shrugged. Perhaps not. He had what he wanted from Sasori, almost. He'd take the scrolls Sasori made on how to create human puppets when he actually left Akatsuki. Everything else would just raise suspicion. Getting a sample of the leader pain was difficult at best, impossible would be closer to the truth. Orochimaru had tried to get it, but he had found out that the Rinnegan had the ability to raise the dead, as secondary bodies, which meant that genetic samples from anything but the original body would be worthless, as the Rinnegan wasn't part of the genetic information of that body. But if that was the case, how could the revived corpse have it? What was different from before the corpse was revived and afterwards? Then Orochimaru had an epiphany. The black piercings on the bodies, he had currently seen too, must be the key. Orochimaru remembered that he'd seen the leader wield similar-looking skewers, and decided to snatch one, just to see what it was. Getting it was easy, as the leader left the broken ones and the ones that were stuck in his enemies' corpses behind. A first analyze gave Orochimaru the answer he had sought. They were made of biomass, and while on first sight their main purpose seemed to be the disruption, a closer look revealed that they were receivers, sending their maker's chakra into whatever was stabbed, disrupting the flow of chakra while opening the way for mental attacks with no way to hit back. But these spikes had to be made of the one that channeled the chakra, and while Orochimaru couldn't check if they had the Rinnegan, he was able to do a basic bloodline test, and to his joy it came out positive. 6 down, 1 to go, plus any potential other members that joined. A hiss of pain escaped Orochimaru's lips when his short flight came to an abrupt end on a few trees. He, Sasori, Kakuzu and Kisame had been ordered to fight a boar demon that was terrorizing villages, for a price, of course. But the damned thing was tougher than they'd expected. The original plan had been to poison it, which was why Sasori and Orochimaru were present, and then just give it a workout till it croaked. But the oversized bacon had decided to make things difficult, as it just refused to drop dead. Sasori had retreated, saying that he didn't have anything but his poisons that would be effective against a boar the size of a whale, and that he had already pumped as much poison as was reasonable into the damn thing, and stated that anything else he had with him would not increase the speed of death by a single second. Orochimaru knew that Sasori had a point. He himself had also pumped everything he thought might work into the pig, and the demon had started to stumble, but it was not happening fast enough for the Akatsuki's tastes. Orochimaru had been knocked back by the last charge of the boar, covering Kakuzu, who was peppering the oversized piece of ham with all elements, leaving heavy injuries. The battle was coming to a close. Orochimaru jumped up and charged again, intent on getting vengeance for that involuntary flight lesson. He would call Manda, but as a member of the Akatsuki he had a hard time getting subjects for his experiments as it was. Gathering the sacrifices Manda required would be near impossible. So for now, he was on his own. He jumped, narrowly avoiding the tusks, and plunged his sword into the demon's eye, before ordering it to extend. I'll turn you into wamiri, food cooked by boiling. Katan, Yakuyaba Shikukuba no Jutsu. The boar squeaked in agony as it was slowly boiled from the inside out, not to mention the blade going through its eye into the brain. Orochimaru jumped off, and the dying boar made a last-ditch effort to kill. It charged Kisame and thrusted its left tusk to his midsection. Kisame barely managed to raise Samehada in time to block the vicious attack. But the tusks were harder than he'd expected, as a few of the sword scales were crushed, and one broke off and flew towards Orochimaru, who caught it inches before his eye. Orochimaru curiously looked at the broken scale, knowing that everyone's attention was on the animal-like demon, who had finally dropped to its side and died. Out of curiosity, Orochimaru channeled a bit of chakra into his index finger and scraped the scale over it. The effect was instantaneous. The chakra vanished from his finger, and the scale grew 0.5 millimeter on an edge. Orochimaru smirked. Apparently it was still alive, and Kisame obviously hadn't noticed anything. Orochimaru finally had what he wanted. After years of patient work, he had all the necessary ingredients. Now he just needed to make it work. For that, he needed a base. He had found something promising in Ta no Kuni, soon to be Oto no Kuni, although he'd keep a number of bases spread throughout the elemental nations. He had Kabuto, his best spy, but for waging war, numbers were essential, and having bloodline soldiers would be even better. Kabuto had informed him that a young boy with a fascinating ability had contacted him, asking if Orochimaru, who despite his methods was known to get results, if he could be freed from his curse. What Kabuto had described was intriguing, especially if that curse could be transferred to foot soldiers, making them monstrous powerhouses. Orochimaru had in fact been working on a boost for his troops for a while, but without much success. Enko was the only survivor, but Orochimaru had lost interest in her when she had rejected him. The curse seal just didn't work, but maybe Jugo cells could change that. Little Jugo was God's way of telling Orochimaru that it would soon be time to leave Akatsuki, but not after he had a look at its newest member-to-be that the leader had told them would be there by the time they returned. Orochimaru's eyes bulged. The new member was Itachi Uchiha. The man had fled Konoha after killing his entire clan sans his direct family, not counting the father. Orochimaru knew that the Uchiha were corrupt and lusting for power, traits he respected and liked about them, as it made them predictable. And now the man with the strength to kill an entire clan whose skills were at least similar to his own was a member of Ajatsuki, and therefore for Orochimaru to exploit. Apparently Itachi had awakened something that had been lost for generations, the legendary Mangekyo Sharingan. With Itachi, Akatsuki now had all the members the leader said they would need sans one. Orochimaru would only need to gather a piece of Itachi to be able to make a body that would unite Akatsuki's powers. The last member was still in the air, and the choice would probably take years Orochimaru could not spare. But to his dismay, Itachi was careful, and didn't trust Orochimaru at all, so it was impossible to get a sample. The young Uchiha was always eyeing him, waiting for him to do something that would give him an excuse to attack Orochimaru. And that gave said serpent an idea? Orochimaru grasped his stump of an arm. His hand was on the floor, in front of Itachi's feet. Orochimaru had taken Sasori's scroll on human puppetry and fled. But Itachi had intercepted him, and in a short but violent battle, he had put Orochimaru through his Tsukiyomi after the Sannin had managed to give him a deep cut just below the cheekbone. Itachi had then used the involuntary freeze-up to sever Orochimaru's hand with the kunai that had scratched him. He looked down on the snake man. "All your tricks are useless before my eyes," he stated. Orochimaru's eyes were filled with hatred. "Then I'll make those eyes mine." With that, he opened his mouth and the long tongue shot at Itachi. Itachi jumped back, preparing for an attack, but the tongue merely wrapped around the hand and pulled it to Orochimaru, who jumped back and started to retreat. Itachi smirked. "If you're thinking about reattaching it, you're wasting your time. My blade is covered with a poison that decomposes flesh. By the time you're anywhere near a place with sufficient instruments for such an operation, all nerve endings will have decomposed. That hand will never function again. Jutsu are forever out of your reach. That one would especially hurt, since everyone knew it was Orochimaru's dream to master all jutsu." The man grimaced. "You underestimate me, Itachi Uchiha, and that will be your downfall." Then he shined away. Itachi returned to the lair and reported that Orochimaru had defected, and that it had cost him his hand. Sasori was still upset. "I don't understand what Orochimaru would want with that scroll. All it does is explain how to make a human puppet, something I decided to make should I ever have an apprentice, but for Orochimaru, it's useless. He's not a puppeteer, and even if he started to learn it now, he would never reach the level of skill necessary to fully utilize a human puppet. Konan rubbed her chin. Orochimaru has the corpse of Salamander Hanzo, one of the few men he ever feared. Perhaps he wants to turn him into a weapon for himself? Sasori nodded. Orochimaru is proud. I can believe that he would do that, and with such a high-specs puppet, he could reach the level of a good user, even if mastery of this art is out of his reach. Haiden chuckled. Well, now that he lost the hand, I'd say the fucker would be mediocre at best. Sasori looked at Haiden. A true master of puppetry can move a puppet, or even multiple puppets, with a single finger. Also, if I know Orochimaru, then by some means, he'll regain that hand. Pain shrugged. That man was always a loose cannon, but his services were excellent. We shall deal with him another time. Right now we have more important things to worry about. Also, I found an S-class shinobi who may take over Orochimaru's role as Sasori's partner. Itachi, you and Kisame, your new partner, will recruit him. Use force if necessary. Orochimaru was in a wonderful mood. He had just encountered a blonde man with mouths on his hands that had the ability to form explosives out of clay. Orochimaru had been forced into a small skirmish, got a few strands of hair and some of the raw clay, and retreated, with the man being none the wiser. He had sealed it away, just like he had sealed away everything else he took from Akatsuki, including the kunai with Itachi's blood. The man had actually believed that Orochimaru had used that move for his hand. No, it had been for the kunai in the hand, but Itachi would have suspected something if he had just taken it. All my tricks are useless before your eyes, huh, Itachi? In the end, you fell for it after all. Granted, I hadn't expected it to cost me my hand, but that's a small price to pay for your blood. With your Sharingan, gaining all the world's jutsu will be much easier, so thank you very much. Orochimaru actually had more of Itachi's blood than the man had realized. The kunai Orochimaru used against him had been a special creation of his. There were small holes in the tip, and the interior of the blade was hollow, covered in stability and vacuum seals. When the blade had entered Itachi's flesh, the vacuum seals activated and pulled blood out of his body. Not as much as Orochimaru would have liked, but any more and Itachi would have felt it. Now that he had all the ingredients, he'd find a suitable body, modify it to his needs and take it over. But first, it was time to leave the body he was born with, and move to something better. His perfect host wouldn't be ready that soon, but Orochimaru was a patient man. After all, he had all the time in the world. Years passed. Orochimaru had conquered the body of a woman from Kusagakure, the finest sword mistress the village had ever produced. She had been born with high chakra levels as well, which was a plus, but Orochimaru had chosen her for her sword skills, seeing that he retained the knowledge of the body's former inhabitant, and could take that knowledge and all skills with him, unless it was a Kekkai Genkai. The availability of the host's knowledge was vital, as without it, Orochimaru would be forced to go through extensive rehabilitation in order to get used to the new body. All in all, his jutsu was a success, and there were no signs of a rejection. Jugo was everything Orochimaru had hoped he was and more. Orochimaru had no problems extracting the materials needed to research the effect, and was hoping that he would soon be able to transfer it to others safely. He had also gained a number of followers, including the last Kagaya, Kimimaro. Unfortunately, that was where the good news ended. He had found multiple candidates for his new host, used a solution he had created from Haiden's samples, which he had the most from, on them, and waited for the breakthrough. He had seen that his formula theoretically worked, as he had used the same method to give Jugo's abilities to others. It hadn't worked until Orochimaru weakened the solution, essentially reducing the transformation capabilities to a single form. His first successes merely showed the patterns of their seals, giving them an increase in strength, speed and chakra, but failing to achieve his hope, since they died at force to level 2. After some experimentation, he had found a way to safely allow his subjects to reach level 2. Unfortunately, his subjects had been stuck in their monster form, but his research showed that that was due to lacking mental strength, not a mistake in the formula. Many went insane, and Orochimaru resorted to locking them up at outposts, intending to send Jugo there once the process was perfected. But with Haiden's solution, there were no survivors. He was enraged, yet after 6 failed experiments with 50 subjects per experiment, he decided to save the rest of Haiden's blood, which would not last much longer, and instead use Kimimaro. The boy's Kekkai Genkai was something he desired as well, and Kimimaro was only too willing to supply him with the needed materials. Orochimaru considered using him as a host should the process take longer than expected. Yet the experiments with Kimimaro's solution didn't have any more success. Orochimaru was furious, and Kabuto, who had joined Orochimaru in his work and worked his way up to Orochimaru's right-hand man, was working furiously to solve the problem before Orochimaru forgot himself and ended him. Kabuto scratched his head. This wasn't good. Orochimaru-sama's patience was slowly wearing thin, and he had no results. It just didn't work, but he was too smart to tell that to his master. In the beginning, Kabuto had found it almost amusing that nobody survived becoming immortal, appreciating the irony, but now it was his own neck that was on the line. If it went on like this, Orochimaru might get the idea that an accelerated regeneration like his was needed in order to succeed. Kabuto had tried it, and for a moment, it seemed to have worked, but in the end it had failed as well. There seemed to be one piece of the puzzle he was missing. How do you get someone to survive something that has a 100% chance of killing them? Where do you find a person that doesn't die, despite logic, experience, science, and everything else saying it should? Then Kabuto remembered that he in fact did know such a person. He smiled. This may very well be the breakthrough he had been waiting for. He hadn't finished his thoughts when Orochimaru entered, seemingly in a miserable mood. "How are things going?" he asked. Kabuto shrugged. "The latest batch has died as well." Orochimaru growled and reached for something. Kabuto didn't even want to know what it was, so he quickly continued, "But I have thought of something that has fairly good chances of working." Orochimaru raised a brow. "I'm listening, Kabuto. But your fate may ride on this, so choose your words carefully." Kabuto nodded. "I have tried using accelerated regeneration to make it work, and the results were better than anything else we ever got. But it wasn't enough. So I had the idea to use someone who not only has a regeneration equal, or even superior to what I can do, but also possesses something that doesn't let him die." Orochimaru glared at him. "And where would we find such a person? What you described is a scientist's dream subject." Kabuto nodded. "Where to find him? Perhaps in the last place you would look, Konoha." Orochimaru snorted. "I would have taken such a person would he have existed there. I squeezed everything out of that village before I left. I even looked at Danzo's route." Kabuto smiled. "But what if that person hadn't been born then?" Orochimaru's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" Then it dawned on him. "You're thinking of the Kyuubi brat, aren't you?" Kabuto nodded. "The demon will not allow him to die, and if it sees what we inject as the advantages that they are, it might even improve what we give." Orochimaru nodded. "Yes, the brat would probably live, but what will we do once we injected it into him? Even if he gains the abilities, the demon would destroy me if I attempted to take over the child." Kabuto shrugged. "Suppose that we extract the demon before the actual takeover." Orochimaru frowned. "If a bijou is extracted, the Jinchuriki brilliant. With Haiden's power, he'd survive the extraction, and we could extract sperms for offspring just in case." Kabuto nodded. "That has the highest chance of success from anything I came up with so far. I could probably easily convince the child to join us, seeing that Konoha is making his life hell." Orochimaru chuckled. "Kukuku, yes, the most peaceful and kind of all villages, beating on an innocent child. We can't let that happen, Kabuto, now can we?" Kabuto smiled and pushed up his glasses. "Of course not, Orochimaru-sama. Shall I start gaining the boy's trust?" Orochimaru shook his head. "I have no idea if the Akatsuki is still onto me, so time is of the essence. We don't need his cooperation, just bring me the child. We have to get started as soon as we can." Kabuto bowed. "Understood." Naruto glanced behind him. It was October 10th, his 8th birthday, and he was spending it like all previous birthdays, running for dear life. He didn't understand why he was so hated, but he had noticed that people treated him like trash. They overcharged him or simply refused to sell him anything. They would take their children away when he approached a playground. They muttered curses and insults whenever he was near, and what hurt Naruto the most, they looked at him as if he were some sort of freak. No, what really hurt the most was the annual mob that gathered and chased him through the village to beat him to a pulp. By now, he knew Konoha like the back of his hand and used every trick in the book to escape, usually with success. He'd then return in the evening, clean up his trashed apartment, and life would go on. But first, he had to escape. Usually, he didn't have to do much. He'd simply run through alleys, squeezing his body through holes that were too small for adults to fit through. But this time, they were more stubborn. There was a man with strange white eyes who always seemed to see him, no matter where he hid. The only way Naruto could explain it was that the man knew the alleys just as well as he did. This would make escape difficult. But he wasn't a prankster for nothing. In the next few minutes, he shook most of his pursuers with an array of basically harmless traps. Garbage dropped on them when they tripped over wires, a short tug on a hidden string loosed an avalanche of empty plastic bottles. The most nasty one was a hive of bees in a barrel that he rolled towards the pursuers, followed by a few doses of itching powder. Eventually, he ran around a corner, then hid behind a dumpster while the remaining 20 mob members ran past it. He sighed in relief and crawled out behind the dumpster, only to look the white-eyed man and two friends. Naruto noticed that the other two wore Konoha headbands, and his heart sank. He knew he wasn't good enough to escape those for long, but he could at least try. He had just jumped up when White Eyes slapped 3 spots on his body and Naruto felt his legs buckle beneath him. He couldn't move his legs. And he had trouble breathing as well. He was so screwed. White Eyes looked at the others. I have to return to the compound. Do whatever you want with the demon. The other two nodded. Sure, thanks for your help, we'll keep him entertained. Then White Eyes was gone, and the other two gave dark chuckles. Naruto desperately tried to stand, but it was no use. The men started by kicking him in the ribs with enough force to slam him against the wall. Kabuto pushed up his glasses. He was not a tracker, or a sensory type for that matter. He should have asked to bring that new girl Orochimaru found, Karen was her name, to accompany him. While she didn't have a sample of his chakra that would normally be needed for a sensor to look for a person, it couldn't be that hard to find a child with more chakra than an Inbu that had traces of demonic energy to boot. But Orochimaru had been in a miserable mood because of the repeated failures, and Kabuto had decided it was best not to test his master's patience. And just calling out for him wouldn't be smart, since he would have a bit of trouble explaining to anyone who heard him what he wanted with a boy he had never met, and the boy wouldn't have shown up, not today. The boy wasn't brain-dead, so if he heard anyone call his name on October 10th, the last thing he'd do was answer. No, he'd probably look for a better hiding spot. Frustrated, Kabuto gave the wagon he was dragging behind him a kick. Suddenly a peculiar smell reached Kabuto's nose. He'd smelled it for a while now, but had ignored it since he was used to it. But now he remembered that he wasn't with Orochimaru but in Konoha, and Konoha didn't smell like blood, and neither did the wagon he was carrying. Well, at least not that strong. He followed the scent into an alley, and nearly panicked at what he saw. There was the kid he'd been looking for, nailed to the wall by a number of blades. His limbs were carved open, and there were a few kunai shoved into his neck to keep him from screaming. The two men had obviously used him as a target for their shuriken practice. But what alarmed Kabuto was not that they had cut him open and stabbed his innards, but that they seemingly prepared to finish him off, as one had pulled a dagger and aimed at Naruto's heart. Kabuto's eye twitched in anger. He would so not go back to Orochimaru empty-handed. Before either man had a chance to react, he had pulled out 2 scalpels and sliced the first man's throat, while he rammed the second one into the other guy's brains through the eye. Then he carefully removed the blades that nailed Naruto up first, before pulling out the other ones. He was fascinated when he saw that the boy's internals started to heal as soon as the objects were gone. Kabuto decided that while the boy would probably be completely healed in a minute, it couldn't hurt if he sped things up. After all, he really didn't want to be seen with 2 corpses. Then again, he might have a use for them. He sealed up the first body, then unceremoniously pulled out the scalpel out of the other man's head. He didn't flinch when the eye came out with the blade, and Kabuto simply flicked it into the dumpster before sealing the second body away. Then he focused on healing Naruto. Naruto opened his eyes, and looked into a pair of other eyes that blinked in surprise. Naruto jumped back, but immediately felt wobbly and went down to one knee. The boy pushed up his glasses and raised his open hands, the universal gesture for see. I don't have a weapon. Then he spoke. I didn't think you'd wake up this fast. After what you've been through, I honestly expected you to be out cold for at least half a week. Naruto blinked. What was this guy talking about? Then he remembered the 2 men and looked around with a panicked expression. The boy noticed that. Don't worry, those men are gone. By the way, my name is Kabuto. Naruto nodded. I'm Naruto Uzumaki. So, you convinced the men to leave me alone? Kabuto blinked and scratched his cheek. Sure, let's go with that. How do you feel? Naruto looked down at himself. A little shaky, but otherwise fine. Did you heal me? Kabuto nodded. Yes, I did, but you seem to heal pretty good on your own. Naruto scratched his head. He had always healed fast. I guess I do. Thanks for helping me. Kabuto smiled. You're probably exhausted and hungry. Here, it's not much, but have a bento. He pulled out a half-eaten lunchbox. Naruto nodded and started eating. It was pretty good, and Naruto finished it in under 15 seconds. He grinned at Kabuto. Thanks. Nobody ever gave me something just to be nice. Kabuto's smile suddenly looked a bit sad. Sadly, that didn't change since I didn't either. Sorry kid, but better you than me. Naruto looked at him. What are you? He noticed that everything turned dark. His last thought that he shouldn't have dropped his guard and judged the meal as safe just because it looked like someone had been eating it. Then he was gone. Kabuto almost felt bad for the kid, but he had no choice. And besides, he was excited to find out what would happen in the experiments. Now he had to smuggle Naruto out of Konoha, which was pretty easy. That's why he had brought the corpse wagon. The corpse wagon was a peculiarity of Konoha. Konoha didn't bury its dead inside of the walls, but outside beneath trees, so that the dead may become part of the forest that protects their village. The corpse wagon Kabuto was pulling belonged to the hospital, and they sent it out when patients died in operations or were simply brought here for autopsies before they were buried. That was true for everyone but the Hokage, who was laid to rest in a special shrine with his predecessors by a few trustworthy shinobi who never even whispered the place to outsiders. It had taken Orochimaru years to find the place, since the two trustworthies that he had caught had refused to speak, even under torture. But that wasn't important right now. Fortunately for Kabuto, an old man had recently breathed his last breath in the hospital, and Kabuto had volunteered for the job. Nobody had been suspicious, since while the work was something so harsh that it was used as punishment, the younger generations saw it as a fantastic dare. All alone in a dark forest filled with wild animals. The only companion a corpse. So everyone had simply thought that Kabuto had been dared to do it. Getting out was easy enough. The patrols checked his ID and let him go. Nobody expected him to be back for a few days since the corpse would have to be buried at least 5 to 10 miles away, and the wagon wasn't fast. Also, there were a few ceremonies that had to be done. Kabuto waited until he was far away from the village, then he loaded the unconscious Naruto out of the cart, put him in a sack and sealed up the whole wagon. Now he could run with the unconscious bundle over his shoulders and quickly reach the meeting point. From there, he would use a few underground shortcuts to quickly reach Orochimaru before the tranquilizer wore off. Orochimaru was impatiently waiting for Kabuto. The test solution with Kimimara's DNA was ready and waiting for the test subject, and so was Orochimaru. Finally, the door opened and Kabuto stepped in, a promising bundle on his shoulders. Did you succeed? Kabuto dropped the bundle, pulled off the sack, and an unconscious Naruto Uzumaki dropped to the floor. Of course, Orochimaru-sama, said Sannin. Nodded. Good. Then let's begin the experiment. Kabuto nodded, removed Naruto's clothes, placed the oxygen mask on his face, stuck a heart rate detector to his chest, placed a catheter into his arm that was long enough for him and Orochimaru to inject the solutions and nourishment from the outside, and tossed him into the prepared tank filled with a clear liquid. Then he injected the first solution. Now all they could do is wait. From their past experiments, Kabuto deduced that they would have to wait half an hour before something happened. Usually then the subjects croaked, but Kabuto was hoping that that didn't happen here, or he'd be in a lot of trouble and a world of hurt. They left long before Naruto's body started to thrash. Kabuto had decided to wait an hour, so that the changes had more time to take place. When he entered, the first thing he heard was the calming peeping of the machine, telling Kabuto that Naruto's heart was still beating. But he decided to take a blood sample and checked if Naruto now had the Shikatsumiyaku or if the fox had chosen the easy way out and simply burned the solution out of the boy's system. That had been his greatest worry, especially since he didn't share it with Orochimaru beforehand. If this went wrong, then Kabuto would have put Konoha on high alert for nothing. Come on, Naruto, don't let me down now, he muttered as he took the blood. He immediately started to analyze it, while repeatedly muttering, please have it, please have it, please have it, please. Then he got the result. Yes. Sarutobi had called a full council meeting. The clan heads and civilians had gathered, albeit reluctantly. Hayashi spoke first. Hokage-sama, why have you called us? Sarutobi looked at him. I sent my ANBU out to make sure that this is correct, and they have confirmed my suspicion. Naruto Uzumaki is no longer inside of Konoha. The only ones who looked thunderstruck were Ichiraku and Danzo. The clan heads took the situation neutrally, while the civilians openly smiled. One merchant spoke up. Thank you for bringing us the good news, Hokage-sama, but you could have just publicly declared it. Another shop owner nodded. True. 8 years ago, the demon was sealed and now it has left for good. Danzo facepalmed. Then he looked at Sarutobi. Could we have details? Sarutobi nodded. Of course, that's why I called the meeting. One of our ANBU patrols noticed a large amount of fresh blood in a side road in the 3rd district. He took samples and they showed to be of 3 different people. The majority of the blood was from Naruto Uzumaki, but there were 2 others. We have made a head count and found that 2 of our Chunin are missing. We have determined that the blood is theirs. The first merchant jumped up. So the demon murdered them and hid their bodies? Sarutobi shook his head. From the clotting of the blood, we have determined that Naruto bled first. By the time that the former Chunin's blood was spilled, he would have been far too weak to do anything. And you've insulted every ninja in this room and their clans, by suggesting that they would not be able to notice if a sufficient amount of demonic energy to defeat 2 Chunin were released. The merchant looked around and noticed that all clan heads were indeed glaring at him, especially the ones who prided themselves as trackers. He gulped. So those honorable Chunin tried to purge the demon, and were killed by one of his demonic servants. Hayashi looked at him, something akin to pity in his eyes. You're making a fool out of yourself. If the boy had demonic servants, why did he never use them in the 8 years that he lived here? According to some reports, he can barely keep his apartment clean, and he has been beaten every year. Danzo bit his lip. I find the most likely scenario that those 2 Chunin attacked Uzumaki and tortured him, which is not unheard of. Then someone else appeared, killed the Chunin, got rid of their bodies and abducted Uzumaki. I suggest we send a group of our hunter nin as a search party, seeing that whoever took him obviously has the skill to take out 2 Chunin without anyone noticing. Sakuya Haruno jumped up. We are trying to get the D. She noticed Sarutobi's gaze, which had grown very cold, and corrected herself mid-sentence. Damned boy back? After we're finally rid of him? Why? Sarutobi's old teammates nodded, but Danzo rose from his seat. Stupid woman. That child holds the strongest bijou in existence. Do you even understand the concept behind Jinchuriki? You take a demon of uncontrollable power and seal him inside a human. The difference between sealing it in a human or sealing it in an object is simple. An object locks the power away. A human gives you the possibility to control the demon's power. Just because the boy can't control the demon yet, doesn't mean he won't learn it in the future. And now an enemy has him, and can train him to serve him. That means he could train him to destroy Konoha. If that doesn't work, he could simply bring Uzumaki close to Konoha and break the Yondame's seal. Then the Kyuubi would be free, and I doubt it has forgotten us. Do you really wish for a repeat of what happened 8 years ago? Sakuya shivered, but she remained strong. We have the Hokage and Jiraiya, our greatest seal master and teacher of the Yondame. Now that it has been done once, it would be easy for the 2 of them to seal it away once more. Shibi Aburame spoke, for the first time. Presuming it were possible, we have already learned that the Kyuubi can only be sealed into a child. Where would we find such a child? Shikaka snorted. He's right. After what happened to Naruto Uzumaki, nobody will offer their child for such a sealing. Why should they? So that they can see their child beaten and be shunned for giving birth to a demon? Or perhaps we mistook Sakuya and she was volunteering her child for such a sealing should the Kyuubi show up in front of our gate right now. Sakuya paled. She would never give Sakura away to have the demon sealed inside of her. But she understood one thing. Why should any parent feel other than she did? They were right, even if they could get the seal, they wouldn't have a vessel. Not even orphans were an option, since the orphanages had the right to deny usage of the children under their supervision. Shikaka took her silence as an answer. I didn't think so. Hokage-sama, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I support Danzo's suggestion. Sarutobi nodded. Any objections? There were none. Everyone was far too frightened by the idea of Kyuubi appearing again to object. Sarutobi looked around. Very well, the hunter nin will be dispatched immediately. Orochimaru looked at Kabuto, expecting positive news. And? He asked. Kabuto smiled. He survived. I checked his blood, just in case, and the results are positive. He has the bloodline. Orochimaru smiled. Excellent. We'll give him a day to recover, then we'll inject the first sample. Kabuto nodded. Which sample will we use first? Haiden's? Orochimaru frowned. No. The Kyuubi helps our procedure because he might die with his host otherwise. If we make him immortal now, it might not support any further changes, choosing to wait it out instead. We'll begin with that Iwanin's, Deidara was his name I believe, sample. By the way, have you found out anything about that clay he used? Kabuto shrugged. I analyzed it, but honestly, I was wasting my time. It's ordinary sculpting clay, although a very expensive one, nothing special about it. I theorized that any clay or even simple mud would work as well, but I really can't say without further research. Orochimaru nodded. If you were correct, that would be even better, since it would mean that I'd have an unlimited supply of explosives. But you have to be patient for your experiments. I don't plan on pulling Naruto out of that tank anytime soon. He'll get out when we train him, not sooner. In any case, return to Konoha so that nobody catches suspicion. Return once it's safe for you to do so. Kabuto bowed. Understood. Sarutobi looked outside his window. It had been a week, and there was still no news about Naruto. The hunter nins had swarmed, but they had to return empty-handed. There were no traces of the boy, and nobody had seen a blonde child with whisker marks. The reaction of his village had been a disappointment as well. They had started an extended celebration in response to Naruto's disappearance, setting his apartment on fire and destroying anything that belonged to him. The Ichiraku's, Konoha's best ramen shop, had closed for the duration of the celebration and openly refused to serve those who celebrated. One of the men who had tried to get served on the first day of celebration had openly stated that on such a happy day, they deserved some good ramen to celebrate the demon's disappearance. Ichiraku's daughter Ayam had swiftly reacted by taking a pot with still hot oil and poured its content over the man's head, before grabbing a hot frying pan and ordering everybody to leave within 10 seconds, or else. While that reaction warmed Sarutobi's old heart, he was still bitterly disappointed. Reactions like that should have been the rule, not the exception. Even Kakashi had taken the information with a shrug, although he had started to drink more, and seemed a lot more willing to punch people in the face. Everyone had their own way of dealing with grief. The only other person to truly miss the blonde was Hinata Hyuga. The young heir had liked the boy for a while, ever since he actually managed to prank the entire Hyuga clan and taken his punishment with a smile. She had locked herself up in her room and refused to open it for anyone. Perhaps it was time to send Kushina a long overdue letter, asking her for forgiveness for lying to her about her son. The results of that action would probably be ugly, but he couldn't take the guilt of lying to her any longer. He had kept quiet because at the time, Kushina's mental state after hearing about her husband's death had been questionable, and she might have been a danger to her child. Although he seriously doubted that Kushina would see it that way. Sarutobi grabbed for his pipe. God knew he needed it right now. It had taken almost a month for Kabuto to return to Orochimaru. In the meantime, the Sannin had injected 3 more samples into Naruto. The next time Kabuto saw him in his tank, the boy had mouths on his hands, his closed eyes were now rippled, and his flesh consisted of a number of black threads. Contrary to his former comments, Orochimaru had taken Naruto out of his tank a few times, after every procedure to be exact, to analyze him. He had also brought Karen, who had started to gain interest in medical research, to better evaluate his chakra flow. Orochimaru had discovered that while Naruto seemed to consist of nothing but threads, eyes, a heart, a brain and the 2 mouths on his palms, he still had a skeleton, which was much tougher than a normal human's. He deduced that it had something to do with the formerly injected bloodline of Kimimaro. The QB seal had wandered to the boy's heart and engraved itself there, probably to avoid being destabilized by the constant mutations. The girl, Karen, had noted that Naruto's chakra flowed in completely different patterns every time they injected something new. At first, new chakra coils had developed in his arms, hands and palms to support the required energy for the new mouths. Then the coils around his eyes had thickened, to allow the Rinnegan to function. And now that he consisted of threads, the chakra in his body seemed unpredictable, sign there no longer were real coils. Karen had found it fascinating. Kabuto on the other hand was worried. This was all proceeding too fast for his likes. They had no idea what exactly was happening, and Kabuto was honestly worried that Naruto's body would eventually be unable to keep up with the required mutations at this pace. He had shared that worry with Orochimaru, asking him to slow the pace of new injections, but the Sannin waved him off. Apparently, he could hardly wait to have the perfect body, since he wanted to train the boy a bit before he claimed him as his own. Still, Kabuto had a bad feeling. And he would be proven right. They had injected Conan's sample into him 2 hours ago, and Kabuto came to check on Naruto. The moment he entered, he felt that something was not right. The machine showed that the boy's heart rate was much higher than it should be, but still within acceptable bounds. Still, Kabuto felt that something was wrong, and he looked into the tank. At first sight, he couldn't see anything out of the ordinary, and turned to take a blood sample, when he noticed the anomaly. The liquid around Naruto's right knee was a bit murky. Since that knee was facing away from Kabuto, he walked around the tank to see what was wrong, and he froze. A portion of skin on the knee, as big as Kabuto's palm, was missing. A few threads were in the water, showing the naked bone. But what shocked Kabuto was that both the threads and the bone looked to be decomposing. And unlike any previous experiments, the wound was not instantly shrinking. Kabuto suspected that it was in fact getting bigger, just too slow to see it with the naked eye. He ran towards Orochimaru's chambers. Orochimaru was currently discussing medical ideas with Karen, who showed a remarkable talent in that field of expertise, when Kabuto barged into the room, clearly agitated. Orochimaru frowned at him. "What is it, Kabuto?" Kabuto took a second to take a breath, then he answered, panic in his voice. "Orochimaru-sama, it's Naruto. He's decomposing." Orochimaru's eyes widened. "What?" Kabuto's hunch had been correct. In his short absence, the hole in Naruto's knee had widened 0.5 millimeter. A short calculation gave him the result that they had roughly 4 days until he had completely decomposed, and only 2 days to save his life. Orochimaru was fuming. "What is going on?" he shouted. Kabuto shrugged. "I don't know yet, I informed you as soon as I saw the damage." "Karen, what is going on in him chakra-wise?" Karen focused, and shuddered at the demonic feeling. An enormous amount of Kyuubi's chakra is flowing into his knee. As far as I can tell, it's trying to repair the damage. But the chakra of the cells is too chaotic for me to tell clearly what's wrong, but it feels like the internal chakra is shredding the cells, and doing it faster than Kyuubi can heal. Without that healing factor, he'd probably be dead by now, and nothing but a murky cloud in the tank in 10 minutes, tops. Orochimaru let loose killing intent that left the other two on the floor. How and especially why is this happening? And how can we fix it? Kabuto focused. Orochimaru-sama, we have to take samples and analyze before we can make a deduction. With the current speed of decomposition, we have 2 days to save Naruto. The killing intent vanished and Kabuto and Karen could stand. Then you two better not waste any time. I want results. Kabuto and Karen glanced at each other, then they hurried to pull Naruto out of the tank to take samples. Karen, have a look at this, Kabuto said, looking up from a microscope. Karen, who despite all her talent simply didn't have the experience to discover the problem and was literally in tears, wiped her face clean and hurried to the bespectacled boy. She looked into the microscope. The cells were twisting, bending, contracting and stretching, all at the same time. Eventually the individual cells couldn't resist the strain and popped. She looked at Kabuto. It looks like they're trying to do too many different things at once without being able to handle the strain. What could have caused it? Kabuto scratched his head. Let's see. He was fine the last time we checked, so what changed between then and now? Karen frowned. We injected a new sample into him. Do you think his body couldn't adapt to it? Kabuto shook his head. No, if he can survive having the Kekkei Genkai of the Kagaya, that alters the entire body, injected, there's no reason why he wouldn't be able to adapt to any other one. Karen sighed in frustration. We injected a sample that should turn his body into paper. At which step is the problem? She drew a few sketches of how a body's transformation to paper would probably work, how his skin and internals dissolved into thin sheets. Kabuto glanced at her sketching with modest interest, then he froze. His eyes widened. That's it, he stated. Karen looked at him. What's what? Kabuto pointed at her sketches. The mistake you made in those sketches are probably the reason for our problem. Karen frowned. Mistake? I find my work plausible. Kabuto nodded. Yes, on a normal person, it would probably look like that. But Naruto is not a normal person. Karen looked at her sketches, then her eyes widened. Naruto doesn't have internal organs and flesh. His body transformed it into black threads. She whispered. Kabuto eagerly nodded. Yes, and now his cells are getting contradicting orders. Transform into thread is met by transform into sheets of paper. The cells are trying to do both, but they can't, so they destroy themselves while trying. Karen nodded. That sounds correct. But that leaves one question. How are you going to fix it? Orochimaru asked. Kabuto and Karen glanced at each other. Finally Karen spoke. We went through multiple scenarios, but most didn't work since it's impossible to extract the solution to undo the damage. After much debate, we came up with a solution that might work. Orochimaru raised a brow. And what would that be? Kabuto gulped. We inject him with Jugo's DNA. Orochimaru frowned. You say the problem is that the cells can't mutate into multiple things, and your solution is to add one more thing to turn into? Karen swallowed her fear. Let us explain, Orochimaru-sama. Jugo is unique since his flesh can constantly mutate into anything he wants. If we add that as a buffer, then Naruto's flesh should be able to change into threads, then into the mutating flesh and then into paper. He would not be able to transform completely into both at the same time, but it should work. Orochimaru nodded. We have the genetic material, but it will take a day to change it into a solution we can inject. Let us start immediately. They had worked as fast as they could, and Jugo's samples had been surprisingly unwilling to turn into the desperately needed solution, but in the end they had managed. Now they were in the room with Naruto's tank. The boy had decomposed all the way to the hip, the decomposition on his left side reaching the 3 lowest ribs. His fingers had also halfway eroded away by now. Kabuto injected the solution, since the arm with the catheter was thankfully still intact. Karen frowned. Nothing's happening. Kabuto took a deep breath. It takes a while for the solution to spread through the body. In an hour or two, we should be able to see results. Good ones or bad ones. Kabuto mentally added, but was smart enough to keep his mouth shut. An hour later, when he entered the room again, Kabuto was greeted with a most fortunate sight. Naruto was peacefully floating in his tank, completely intact. Kabuto felt utterly relieved. His head was safe. Orochimaru had learned from that near disaster, and said he would wait with the next solution for at least 2 months. In the meantime, they would study the samples they took to see if there was anything unusual that might endanger his future host. But everything seemed in order, Jugo's samples actually improving the entire design. Naruto now had internals and chakra coils once again, though they were not desperately needed, and his chakra had actually calmed some. That had actually solved a potential problem Orochimaru had seen with Haiden's gift. The man reflected damage to his opponents. How would Orochimaru damage the opponent's internals if he himself had none? But now Naruto had internals when he needed them, so that was no longer an issue. 2 months had passed without any sort of problem, so Orochimaru decided it was time for the next shot. But just to be careful, he had chosen the sample of the only Akatsuki member that had no physical anomalies, Sasori. The process had gone without a hitch, and Karen confirmed that something had changed. Naruto's chakra was now completely calm, flowing through his body like a strong current, but without a single obstruction or chakra spike. His control would most likely be light years above what it was before. Orochimaru smirked. Since we will make longer breaks between giving him the injections, we should begin to train him. Puppetry is not a Kekkei Genkai, so I want him to master it as soon as possible. They learn better when they start young. Kabuto nodded. Honestly, he was itching to find out what the boy could do. They had already organized a number of puppets, and materials for human puppets, together with a few corpses of mid-class shinobi. They wouldn't give away a precious corpse until they knew that it would be a success. Kabuto looked at Karen, who had been ordered to take care of Naruto together with him. This will probably be quite tiring. Karen raised a brow. Why? All we have to do is teach him how to form chakra strings, and give him motivation for figuring the rest out. Kabuto sighed. That would work, right up to the point where we want him to make a human puppet. Karen tilted her head. Why, we give him the scroll and wait till self-preservation makes him overcome any morals of cutting up corpses. Kabuto face-palmed. The boy was a pariah in his village, what on earth makes you think he can read? Karen gaped. The kid is 9, and he can't read? He was 8 when he was awake the last time. Kabuto reminded her. She groaned. Great, so we have to teach him how to read? Kabuto shrugged. Looks like it. But for now, we have to get him out and wake him up. They pulled him out of the tank, removed the mask that had supplied oxygen and a tranquilizer. Kabuto grimaced. Remind me to request that this thing is cleaned more often. It hasn't been off once since we originally put it on. A few more months, and the air hole would probably have grown shut. He dropped it. Karen took 5 steps back. You. Kabuto, please clean his face. Without the QB, he probably would have died from infection by now. I'll wait for you in his designated training room. Looks like I'll have to get some books too. Some stuff for beginners, but the majority will be medical texts. They'll be better when he reads the scroll anyways. Kabuto waved his acknowledgement and carried Naruto to get washed and dressed. When he brought Naruto, now dressed in a simple shirt and pants, into the designated room, Karen was already waiting for him. Kabuto dropped Naruto on the makeshift bed, a pile of hay. Then they started discussing what they'd do with the boy. Orochimaru wanted results, but he wouldn't get those if the boy couldn't read the instructions. Their thoughts were interrupted by a groan. They turned their heads and saw Naruto twitch. Then, for the first time in over a year, Naruto Uzumaki opened his eyes. Naruto slowly opened his eyes. He was in a room that seemed literally split. It seemed friendly at first, it was clean, the colors were bright, and the straw he was laying on was better than some of the other things he had used as beds, especially the one in the orphanage with all the springs that Naruto had noticed were regularly sharpened sticking out. The dark part of the room was the far end, since instead of a wall with a door, all there was were bars that seemed to glow. He was in a prison. How do you feel? A voice asked. Naruto turned his head and saw 2 people sitting on chairs. One was a girl roughly his age with glasses and long red hair, the other one was that Kabuto that had knocked him out. How long had he been out? A few hours, a day, or more? If he only knew. Another weird thing was that both were surrounded by a weird haze. The girl's haze seemed to be sizzling, while Kabuto's was somewhat strained. He looked at them. Where am I? Why are there glowing bars on the wall? And what is that stuff around you? The two looked at each other with raised brows. Then Kabuto spoke. I'll answer your first and second question later, although I might add that the bars are not glowing. As for your third question, it's called air. We breathe it. Aside from that, there's nothing there. Do you see something else? Naruto looked at them as if they had lost their minds, though it was hard to tell with the emotionless eyes of the Rinnegan. Only the weird mist thing surrounding you too. How can you not see it? It's right in front of you. A second ago, yours seemed kinda strained while hers, he pointed at the girl, was sizzling or boiling or something like that. Now both of yours are just going in swirls. The two looked at each other again, another unseen conversation going between them. Then Karen spoke. Since I'm a sensor, I can tell that there's chakra in the bars from the seals, and that we are surrounded by our chakra. Maybe that's what you're seeing. Naruto looked at her. I could never see chakra, so why now? And who are you? Why am I here? Karen blinked. That's right, I haven't introduced myself yet, have I? My name is Karen, you already know Kabuto. We're working for someone, I doubt you've heard of him, his name is Orochimaru. Naruto frowned. No, doesn't ring a bell. Again, why am I here? He tried to jump up, but he misjudged the length of his legs and fell to the floor. Karen looked at Kabuto. They'd have to teach him how to walk as well? Then again, the boy had grown with the nutrients he received, and he hadn't moved for over a year. It was no wonder that his brain hadn't adjusted to the longer limbs yet. Hell, it was amazing that his muscles still functioned this well after a year in a tank. Kabuto sighed. You shouldn't try to move that much, you've been out for a while and your mind needs to adjust to your body. As for why you're here, it's kinda complicated. For now, all you need to know is that you have to stay here a while, and that Karen and I are going to teach you a few things, reading amongst them. Karen looked at Kabuto. You're forgetting medicine and anatomy. He'll learn the basics of that, as he'll need it later. Kabuto shrugged, bored. I know. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. First he has to learn to read, and how to form chakra strings. Naruto looked at the two people. So, you plan on teaching me? Why? The two shared a look, and a sweat drop. Kabuto cleared his throat. Let's just say we're under orders to turn you into a shinobi, and you'll gain the ability of a puppeteer, a rare but very useful talent. Naruto raised a brow. Puppets? How is that supposed to help? He had concluded that in his current situation, there was no way out for him. If he wanted to get out, he'd have to go along with their plans and look for a good chance to escape. He didn't know it, but Sasori's solution had done more than just improve his chakra control. It had also raised his IQ a good 70 points, and it had already been above average. Naruto now had the mental resources of a genius in the making. Karen shrugged. There are special combat puppets. The size of a human, and usually stuffed with all sorts of nasty surprises. Okay, now that that's cleared, let's start with the chakra strings first. Reading later, and learning how to move without falling over your own feet could probably be helpful as well. She and Kabuto had already clearly outlined the does and don'ts of Naruto's training. Puppeteering, yes, that was why they were here. Medicine and anatomy, yes, as they needed him to be able to make human puppets, and he had to understand enough from the scroll to not royally screw up. Usage of the mouths, yes, as it was not only interesting, but it was also the part Naruto was bound to notice in a short amount of time. Learning how to turn his body into strings and control his bone structure, maybe later, it gave ideas for dark, cold nights. Teaching him how to transform into sheets of paper, no, they didn't need that yet, and the seals on the bars hadn't been modified to create a barrier yet. If the boy escaped through the bars, Orochimaru would play bowling with their heads. The Rinnegan, hell no! They really didn't need Naruto taking the place apart, or fling them through the air like leaves in a storm. And as if on cue, Naruto looked at his hands, probably wondering how he'd make the strings. He gasped in shock. Why are there mouths on my hands? He shouted. Kabuto sighed. I was hoping you'd take a little longer to notice them. Those mouths are a Kekkei Genkai, a ability unique to clans. They are something only people with DNA like yours can use. You can't eat food with them, as they're not connected to your stomach, and you can't talk with them, as they have no vocal cords, or connections with the lung. Naruto stared at his hands. What do they do? Karen coughed. We're not entirely sure yet. What we do know for certain is that you can animate clay into moving figures that explode with a great force by letting your hands chew it. What we don't know is if you're restricted to clay or can use anything of the nature like mud. Naruto looked at his hands. So one of my parents had these too? Kabuto and Karen glanced at each other. Maybe. We honestly have no idea, but it's possible. It was. They just didn't say how likely it was. Naruto nodded. Okay. Since I seem to have little choice either way, let's start. Karen nodded, waved him closer to the table with the scrolls, and they started. The next weeks passed quickly for Kabuto and Karen. Naruto was an amazing student if you could answer his questions. He only needed something explained once to memorize it, and his imagination was almost scary. Not only could he come up with ingenious and crazy plans, but he could picture things to a mind-baffling degree, as he only needed to look at the pieces for a minute to put a 1,000-piece puzzle together, without making a single mistake or a moment's hesitation. Teaching Naruto kanji had also been much easier than Karen had feared, and from the way they were going through the scrolls, he'd probably knew enough to become a mediocre doctor in a few weeks. Forming chakra strings had taken a week, but now the boy could instantly summon them. They had also found time to test out Deidara's bloodline. It turned out that Naruto could use any type of earth in an at least semi-liquid state as explosives, even wet sand worked. But it couldn't be dried dirt, and there was some sort of order for the effectiveness of the explosives. Deidara's clay worked best, seeing that it was of a high quality. Clay in general seemed to be the most effective material for the bombs, while mud and wet dirt were not as good. Orochimaru had been patient, understanding that rushing the puppeteering without Naruto being able to understand what he was supposed to do would be a waste of time and effort. Also, the room where Naruto would train puppetry had to be prepared, and the corpses of mid-class shinobi that had been gathered for human puppets had been sealed into scrolls, then organized according to their elemental affinity. They couldn't gather corpses of high ranking, as the villagers might have thrown a fit if high-class shinobi vanished. Now it was time to teach Naruto puppeteering, before he would receive Itachi's sample. Who knew, the Sharingan might actually make it easier for the boy. They had prepared a training room for Naruto, and already used the trusted narcotics to knock him out. Now all they had to do was wait. Naruto woke up with a small headache. He looked around to find himself in a new room. He was laying in a new pile of hay, but beside that, the room was different. It seemed colder, and instead of a table where Kabuto and Karen were waiting for him, he saw a large workbench filled with parts of puppets and other materials. On the other side, there seemed to be a table for operations including scalpels and other medical instruments. There were a few medical scrolls and one that said human puppetry. The opposite wall was another set of bars, but there was an opening. Not big enough to slip through, but his arms would fit through. Behind the bars, there was a man-sized puppet laying on the floor, while to the far wall Naruto could see a table with food and a jug on a stone basin filled with water, everything far beyond his reach. He immediately understood that if he wanted to eat and drink, he had to make the puppet get it for him. He immediately extended chakra strings to the puppet, only to see them bounce off an invisible barrier inside the opening. What the hell? He muttered. Had he been wrong? No, it made sense. Perhaps the barrier had been made to prevent Naruto from cheating, like assembling a long straw for water or something like that. He approached the opening and reached for it. Nothing happened, so Naruto stuck his arms in the opening and tried again. This time, the strings connected to the puppet without a problem. The problem came afterwards, when Naruto suddenly realized that he didn't know how to control the puppet. But there was only one way he'd get it, and that was trial and error. Naruto already felt that his throat was dry. He had probably been unconscious for hours before he woke up here. He needed water. He moved each finger to see what it did, then he tried different combinations. The puppet twitched like mad, but there was no control whatsoever. This would take a while. Kabuto and Karen looked into one of Orochimaru's observation monitors. It had almost been 2 days, but Naruto had succeeded in moving the puppet to supply himself with food and water. And to their satisfaction, after he had eaten and drunk, Naruto continued to tinker with the puppet. They would inject Itachi's sample into him soon, and the better the boy was with the puppets, the better he'd get in the future. Right now, the puppet was almost as agile as a normal civilian, just a little stiff. They'd also need the downtime to redecorate the training chamber for puppeteering. They had developed a clever schedule that would turn Naruto into a puppeteer that even Sasori would respect. Right now they were working with him on multiple levels. The room where they taught him to read and the room where he worked with puppets were connected through a tunnel, so that Naruto could work on reading with them, and on puppets in the other room. Soon Naruto would build his first human puppet. Naruto's next awakening was less pleasant than the former ones. He had an itch in his eyes, and his vision seemed to have changed again. He could still see the weird haze around himself, but now he also saw things much clearer than before, especially movement. Unknown to him, 3 tomo were around his pupil, and a few shadows seemed to be in some rings. He saw that he was in the puppet room again, but this time, there was a note. He opened it. You will build your own puppet this time. The materials are on the workbench, together with instructions. The difficulty of your task has been upped. You will also repair any damages to the puppet. That was it. No introduction, no signature, just these instructions. But Naruto knew that he had little choice, and turned to the workbench. The instructions were clear and easy to read, but it was still an exhausting and strenuous job, and Naruto often scraped his skin, cut himself, pulled splinters out of his skin and squashed a finger. And the wood he was working on already had the basic shape of a puppet, only requiring few modifications. When Naruto finally succeeded, he decided to test the puppet in here before sending it into a situation where it might get destroyed. He was slowly getting the hang of it, and after a few hours, he could move it fluently, so that without the wooden clacking, an onlooker would have sworn that it was not a puppet, but a good genin that was moving around. Naruto had also noticed that he could get the puppets to float, and tried to improve on that, although it could still use a lot of work. But by now, he was hungry, and with working and training, he had sweat out precious liquid. The bars now had another opening through which Naruto could push the puppet, but this one seemed to be the opposite of the one he stuck his hands trough. When he touched the empty space, the barrier had come to life and burned his fingertips. It had healed after a few seconds, but it still hurt. Naruto learned from it, and pushed the puppet as far as it went without risking contact with the invisible barrier. Then he stuck his hands through the upper opening, and used chakra strings to pull the puppet completely to the other side before making it stand up. Now he looked at the room and noticed that it was now much larger. Also, there seemed to be a number of dark corners out of which traps could shoot. Naruto carefully moved the puppet towards the desperately needed water, waiting for ambush, but it seemed that whoever was controlling the traps was willing to give him one free shot to get at least some of the needed nourishment before they got serious. Naruto made the puppet grab water and a slice of bread before making it go back. Again it got to him without a scratch and handed him water and food. But when Naruto sent the puppet for more, the traps sprang into action. A guillotine-like blade dropped from the ceiling, and Naruto only barely managed to get the puppet back in time to save it being chopped in half. As soon as he tried to use the opportunity that the blade was down, spikes shot out of the floor, grazing the puppet. Naruto's brow twitched. A single thought was going through his head. After all the blood, sweat, and tears I put in that puppet, you are so not going to just trash it? His hands' motions became furious as the puppet started to dance around the numerous traps that sprung. In his furious focus, he didn't even consciously notice when he took one chakra string off his puppet and glued it to a bladed boomerang that was headed for the puppet to make it veer off course with a twitch. Kabuto and Karen, on the other hand, didn't miss it. Karen looked at Kabuto. Should we start with multiple puppets? Kabuto frowned. He would have liked to get the entire puppeteering thing over with quickly, since Orochimaru had finally agreed to let Naruto train his other bloodlines once that was mastered. But he had also made it clear that he felt no need to go deeply into normal puppeteering, as human puppets were all he was really interested in. No. Orochimaru-sama has little interest in normal puppetry, so we'll allow him to improve on using a puppet, and since he started writing down ideas for stuff to hide in puppets, we'll let him improve on that as well. Then we'll have him create human puppets, learn to use them and their affinities. Once that's done, he'll learn how to control more than one of them at the same time. 2 at first, with identical traps, then with individual traps that will force Naruto to split his attention. Once that's done, we'll increase the number of puppets until he can control 10 at the same time. Then, as Orochimaru-sama instructed, he'll learn how to move while controlling his puppets. Karen looked. Let me guess. He'll learn the hard way? Kabuto shrugged. Unless you have a better idea. Karen sighed. No, not really. Naruto looked around. He was in the room for puppeteering, but things had changed. The connection to the other room was blocked, and his puppet was missing. There were materials for a puppet, but something was off. The operating table seemed to be polished, the medical instruments more numerous, and a number of other devices of unknown function standing around it. On the workbench, there was a small stack of scrolls and another note. He opened it. Again, you have what you need. To understand what you're supposed to do, read the scroll labeled Human Puppets. The traps have been deactivated while you get used to the new puppet. Also, you have 1 gallon of water, a small loaf of bread, and 3 fruits as provisions for the time during the making of the puppet. Naruto frowned. What the hell was this supposed to mean? He knew about sealed objects, Kabuto had told and even showed him, but what could be in those scrolls that was different from what had been on the workbench beforehand? He decided to go for the scroll with the instructions first. He grabbed it, opened it, and began to read. His eyes wandered down the lines, his face growing paler the further he read. After 10 minutes, he was pale as a ghost, but he had read the entire scroll. He grabbed one of the scrolls on the workbench, unrolled it on the operating table, and unsealed what it held. He was not surprised to see a human body laying on the table before him, although he was shocked to see that the body looked to have been barely 16. Dark skin and long black hair was spread around his head like a black halo. Naruto resealed the corpse, tears in his eyes. All the strange devices suddenly gained function for Naruto. That one drained the body of blood and other liquids. That one made skinning the body easier. That thing was a special bone saw for the skull. The scalpels were so that he could remove the innards and replace it with the materials for a puppet. Everything made perfect sense in a very sick way, even why he learned reading with medical texts. Thanks to the scroll and his lessons, he knew exactly what to do to make a human puppet. The only thing he was lacking was practice, which was probably the reason there were so many scrolls. In case he didn't get it right, he would have more to work on. Naruto slumped together next to the operating table, leaning against the wall for support, while he buried his face in his hands. What was he supposed to do now? They wanted him to cut up this boy, who he had never seen before, to gore him, to desecrate the corpse by skinning it, bleeding it dry and removing what had given this human life, and make him a tool. Everything inside of Naruto refused to do it, but he knew that he would eventually have no choice if he wanted to live. Still, right now, Naruto just didn't have the strength. "How's he doing?" Kabuto asked without looking up from his book. He was studying some plans for the near future. Karen looked up from her medical texts to glance at the screen. Still no change. He's just sitting next to the table, staring into blank space. He should get started soon. He ran out of provisions a day ago. Naruto had been in there for almost 4 days now. On occasions he had stood up, ate, looked at the instructions for making a human puppet, taken some instruments into his hands or stared at the scrolls with the bodies. But he had not done anything. Yet. But they knew it wouldn't be long until the boy caved into thirst. The fact that water flowed into the chalice making soft noise that would be maddening in the silence of the chamber was wearing the thirsty boy down quickly. And indeed, Karen saw that Naruto had grabbed a scroll and placed the corpse on the operating table. He checked the instructions again, before moving to attach the dehydrator to the body. Then he grabbed a scalping knife and some other gimmicks for removing skin they had supplied him with. Naruto gulped. He didn't want to do it, but the thirst was killing him. And the corpse wouldn't care what happened with it, since Naruto doubted whoever was pulling the strings in the background would just bury them if he refused to do it and died. That was the main reason he moved to turn the corpse into a puppet. He simply didn't want to die. It was the same boy he had unsealed before. When he touched the dead boy's head, he blinked in shock. He had just flashed through a number of images, gaining knowledge about this poor soul. This boy, his name was Kira, he was, or had been, a low chunin of Kumo. His dream had been to become the strongest and best Raiten user in the world. He knew a few Raiten and chakra control exercises, but besides that, Naruto didn't get much else. Only that the boy had died from a saman, probably poisoned, to the neck, dying alone without even getting close to fulfilling his dream. What the hell was that? He mentally asked himself. Now that Naruto knew something about who he was going to gut, it was much harder to do this. But after a moment's hesitation, Naruto gulped and started peeling off the skin. He felt sick and knew that a part of him had just died. Kabuto whistled, impressed with the boy. He had managed to keep his stomach's content, albeit barely, and was making pretty good progress. Of course Kabuto couldn't see all the details of what was happening, but what he saw made him believe that Naruto seemed determined to get it right on his first try. Probably for some sense of duty to ensure the boy didn't die in vain or something, but if it motivated Naruto, who was he to complain? After another hour, Naruto was done. The first human puppet the boy had ever made was laying before him. In a fit of inspiration, Naruto had done some things that weren't written in the scroll, just to see if it worked. He extended the strings and Kira moved. It was a bit different than a normal puppet, but Naruto could move him and would probably quickly learn to master using him. He gently pushed it through the lower opening and made it get him food and water. Then the puppet returned to him, and Naruto fell asleep, dead tired. The further training had gone extremely well, Naruto mastering making the puppet use elemental and non-elemental jutsu quicker than Kabuto would have dreamed. Of course he didn't know that was mainly due to the fact that Naruto had seen how to create and use elemental chakra and jutsu, although he never showed any jutsu, since he knew he was being watched. They had given him orders to make more puppets, until he had 10, 2 of each element. His second lightning puppet was a woman who could have been Kira's sister, although they weren't related. Her body had begun to change, puberty finally taking hold on her when her life had ended, giving her a Kavya body with BC cup breasts. Naruto had been embarrassed to look at her naked body, but it was not like she could mind. The girl, whose name happened to be Akira, had been stronger than Kira, though not by much. His earth puppets were both male. One was a redhead in his late 30s named Heiji, while the other one, Doman, looked to be at least 80, with gray hair and a long beard. The old one was actually a former hunter nin from IWA that had retired and left the village, so he was particularly strong. His fire puppets, a man and a woman, both in their late 20s, were from an unknown village that was equal to the Uchiha when it came to Katan and known for the green hair of its inhabitants. Since they were both Nukenin, there was little risk that someone would look for Kyra and Hamira. Kazemaru and Fuka, his wind puppets, had been twins, and the only way to tell them apart if you didn't see their figures would be that the brown hair on Fuka's head was longer than Kazemaru's. His first water puppet, a roughly 25-year-old woman with long blue hair, was nothing special, a ordinary chunin from Kiri, although she was as strong as a low-ranking jonin. Her name had been Tsuyumi. But the second one was out of the ordinary. It was the first bloodline puppet Naruto had ever made. It was also one of the hardest things he had ever done, since the boy was even younger than him, only 7. Tsuyukito had been born with the Futenkekei Genkai, also known as boy release. As a result, he had been born by parents who had fled from the bloodline purges and went into hiding. Eventually, the father and his innocent, bloodlineless wife had been found and beaten to death, giving their last gesture of love by not saying a word of Tsuyukito's hiding place. A pale man that had called himself Orochimaru had approached the boy, asking him to join, but Tsuyuki had refused. The man, obviously angered, had poisoned him and tried to force him to join. Tsuyuki had refused to the end and died of the poisoning. For the first time, Naruto saw who was holding him captive. This pale man with the creepy laugh and very short patience. He had never believed that he was just being trained for charity's sake, but now he started to worry what these people had planned for him. He was also starting to doubt that his shifts in vision and other irregularities he had noticed were of a natural cause. But for now, he could only play along. And play along he did. He had managed to retain Tsuyukito's Kekei Genkai, and had been forced to learn how to operate multiple puppets at the same time. At first, he had to control 2 puppets, one with each hand. The traps had been identical in the beginning, but had changed quickly, forcing Naruto to split his attention on multiple things. Then he had been ordered to control the puppet with less strings, and with time, he had been forced to operate 10 puppets independent from each other, and all at the same time. It had taken a week until he had somewhat mastered that, and then they increased the difficulty again. Now he not only had to control 10 puppets, which was no longer possible through the wall, leading to him standing in a chakra construct hanging from the ceiling, but he also had to make sure that he stayed okay. Spikes and rocks shot out of the ceiling at random intervals, weapons shot at his puppets were actually aimed at him, pointy objects targeted him from his blind spots. It was hell. The short breaks were better. Karen gave him a scroll in which he could seal all 10 puppets, while Kabuto had tattooed a number of blank seals on his arms and chest, saying he would probably soon need them. And indeed, not even a week later there was another set with instructions. These simply stated that sealed inside of 3 scrolls were corpses he was supposed to turn into puppets, and that he should make them his masterpieces. Naruto noticed that the materials he was given were of a very high quality, and decided to see who was worth all the effort. He unsealed the first scroll, revealing an unknown corpse of a man wearing a gas mask of sorts. Naruto touched the man's forehead, something that had become a ritual of sorts, and nearly screamed in surprise as the images made their way into Naruto's head. He received a flood of information. He saw a country, hidden beneath a near-permanent rain. He saw strategies, jutsu, and lizard-like creatures that were called by a few hand signs and a small offering in blood. He saw 3 people, one of them a younger Orochimaru, fighting him and getting beaten badly. He saw a man with his right eye bandaged, and how they shook hands. The man was wearing a Konoha insignia, and another one Naruto had noticed on some of the masks of people tailing him. Then there were images of looking down on a small group, but 3 people seemed in focus. One of them, a woman named Konan, was captured, and if one of the 2 boys didn't die, the girl would. The spiky-headed one, Yahiku, jumped at his friend Nagato and was killed, just as he had planned. Then the other one tried to attack, but explosive tags rose from the ground, stuck to his legs and detonated. Those legs would be useless. Just as the troops were about to finish the boy off, something strange happened. A snake-like chakra construct with a dragon's head shot out and killed the troops. The bandaged man and the man with the gas mask retreated, and the last image received from that scene were the boy's eyes. They were of a metallic gray, and had many ripples. A few unimportant scenes flashed by, then he saw the boy that had been killed, together with 5 others. All had those rippled eyes, and they fought as one. Each one had special abilities, and eventually they overwhelmed the man. The woman that had once been a prisoner watched from above, with angel wings made of what looked like paper. The girl seemed to be made of paper. Then there was a black skewer, a sharp pain, then nothing. Only one sentence still echoed. Hanzo, you have suffered the fate of all mortals. Pain, the god of aim has judged you and found you unworthy of redemption. Take this pain to your next life, so that you may grow from it. Naruto looked at the body. This man had been an amazing shinobi, and he had had some pretty big enemies as well. He wondered how Orochimaru had gotten the body, as the man, Hanzo, was obviously stronger than him. Then again, he wouldn't get an answer, but he would go hungry or be punished. Punishment was a system that had recently been added. Essentially, when he tried to break out, or just destroy stuff so that he couldn't do it, he was hit by lightning, which usually left him on the floor, twitching and in agony for 10 minutes before he managed to get up, or other nasty ways of inflicting pain on him. So Naruto turned Hanzo into a puppet, then discreetly using the puppet to unseal a scroll that had been hidden in the man's skin, only to seal it into one of the seals Kabuto had put on him. The Hanzo puppet was also sealed away in his body, and Naruto turned to the second scroll and unsealed it. He jumped back, tripped and landed on his back when he saw who was laying on the table. Either the Shodaime had a look-alike, or he was laying on Naruto's table. Naruto was hyperventilating. Why the hell was the Shodaime laying on the table? Naruto resealed him and grabbed the last scroll, just to see if his suspicion was correct. It was. In front of him lay the Nidaime. Naruto resealed him and collapsed sobbing. Making human puppets out of strangers had torn him apart, and now they wanted him to desecrate two of the people he had admired. Why him? Why did they do this to him? Hadn't he suffered enough already? He grabbed a clean scalpel and played around with it, then cutting his wrist. To his shock, instead of blood, he saw brownish-gray flesh that suddenly grew black strings and mended his skin together. As soon as the skin was reconnected, a section of Naruto's arm turned into a sheet of paper, covered the stitch and returned to normal skin. Not a trace of the cut had remained, and Naruto was sure that he had seen the brown flesh mend together by itself. He stared at his arm, then at the still-clean scalpel. That was when he noticed another irregularity. He was holding the small blade so that its wide side was facing him, and he saw his reflection. The face was still the same, although a bit thinner with slightly colder features. But what shocked him were his eyes. They were rippled, just like Nagato's and later Yahiko's. Did that mean they were related? His skin had turned to paper, just like that woman's, so perhaps those people were his parents. But then, why did he have mouths on his hands as they were in aim, while the people who had mouths like him lived in IWA, according to Kabuto? Well, the nations were bordering on each other, so it wasn't impossible for a crossbreed to exist, but none of the people he saw had anything unusual on his hands. So they weren't his parents. Then Naruto noticed that his eyes were different from Nagato's. There were 3 tomo around his pupil, something that neither Nagato nor Yahiko, if it really was him, had possessed. It reminded him of what the people in that walled section of Konoha had, when their eyes turned red. He knew because he had once landed there by accident, and was brutally beaten, then left to die while anyone who passed him would give him another kick. He probably would have died there, if not for one woman and her 2 children, a boy and a girl, who had smuggled him out of the compound. He had never learned his savior's names. What was going on? Naruto's mind finally provided him the answer. He was an experiment. He had been one before, when a group of people had kidnapped him and operated on him, giving him shots and forcing him to eat things that were clearly not good for him, so he was no stranger to the feeling of being experimented on. The gray flesh, the mouths, the eyes, the strings and the paper, none of that was his. It was something they had done to him. And now that Naruto realized it, he suddenly ghost pain of maddening intensity. He was physically remembering what his body had went through, and it was hell. They had probably given him something from a genius in puppetry as well, but Naruto could still call it his achievement, since those skills were earned, not inherited. Everything he had believed, all his hopes of having a family somewhere, it was all crushed. And as pathetic as it was, he couldn't even end his misery. He slowly rose, gave a short prayer to the Hokage for what he was about to do. If he wanted to talk to Kabuto and Karen, he had to finish the given task. Kabuto and Karen walked into Naruto's glorified prison, and immediately noticed that something was off. Naruto sat at the table, absolutely silent. No smiles, no greeting, just a blank stare. Karen and Kabuto exchanged a worried glance as they took seat on the table, to the opposite of Naruto. Naruto looked at them, then he finally spoke. You are experimenting on me. It wasn't a question. Why, and why me? Kabuto looked surprised, then he sighed. I knew you'd eventually realize it, although I didn't think it would be so soon. Yes, there are experiments on your body, and I'm afraid there will be a few more. Orochimaru tries to artificially implant bloodlines and similar traits to others, so that he may become immortal. We chose you, after many failures, because everyone else we tried died. Karen stared at him for revealing so much, but then she shrugged. It didn't matter anyways. Naruto simply nodded. And why don't I die? Karen shrugged sadly. In for a penny, in for a pound. Because there is something inside of you that won't allow you to die. Kabuto can explain what. She added quickly when she saw Naruto's mouth, his main mouth, open for another question. Kabuto glared at Karen for pushing the dirty jobs to him, but he complied. You probably heard the story about how the Yondaime killed the Kyuubi, right? Naruto nodded. Well, it's bullshit. Nothing can kill a Bijou, Killing normal demons is nearly impossible, as Orochimaru-sama will attest, so the Yondaime did the next best thing. He sealed it in you. You are the vessel for the Kyuubi, its prison, you are a Jinchuriki. Naruto was beyond shocked. I'm what? Karen shrugged. You are the Kyuubi's host, and you are what keeps him locked away. Now it all made sense to Naruto. The beatings, the torture, the hatred, and the cold glares, everything made sense. They hated him because of what Kyuubi had done, and since they couldn't hurt the Kyuubi, they hurt Naruto. He looked at them. Thank you for telling me. Now I'd like to be alone. Karen and Kabuto nodded and left. But Kabuto turned around one last time. Before I forget, when you wake up after the next operation, you won't be learning puppetry. You can practice it, but you will have to act yourself. Naruto nodded, and Kabuto left, knowing that the most complicated operation was ahead of them. Merging Samehada's shard with Naruto proved to be difficult. Even though it was actually alive, there was no non-chakra-using way to gain a serum, and the shard simply absorbed all chakra. The operation had been nerve-wracking, complicated, and time-consuming, but in the end, they had managed. All they could do now is wait for what happened. An hour later, Naruto had grown scales. Not like a lizard, but similar to the real Samehada's looks, although they could seemingly shrink, leaving him looking like he was wearing chainmail. The only problem had been that they were now unable to touch Naruto, as everyone who tried lost skin, if they were unlucky flesh, and a shitload of chakra. In the following days and weeks, Naruto had learned how to control his new natural armor. It had taken 2 weeks, but he was now able to make it sink into his skin, making him look normal, while it could be brought back out instantly. Another curious thing was that when Naruto grew scales on his palms, the mouths, or to be more precise their teeth, changed. Whenever the mouth was surrounded by scales, it grew sharp teeth, and seemed to be able to feed on chakra now as well. But even while learning control of his natural armor, Naruto's skills bloomed. A boy named Kimimaro had been called and instructed him on how to make his bones weapons in certain parts of unarmed and armed combat, although he was mostly strengthening his body and learning how to dodge and block, and Naruto took to it like a fish to water. He also trained turning into paper, a little bit of explosives training. He learned how to actually use paper and utilize and turn into thread, and the secret behind the black threads. He had learned to use his eyes, unlocking some sort of powers that he hadn't known before. For the rippled eyes, Naruto had received plenty information out of Hanzo's head, but the other abilities of his eyes were astounding. He could make an inescapable illusion in which he controlled even time, summon black fire, and something else that he never really tried, but felt was powerful. Also, ever since Naruto had grown scales, he never felt exhausted after using jutsu. A few weeks after Naruto's latest achievements, which he downgraded to keep everyone underestimating him, Orochimaru decided to field test his armoring. There had been a few people rebelling against him, and they had been caught in a bar, together with a few unsuspecting guests, namely Kintsuchi. So Orochimaru thought of something special. He had gathered the entire lot in an arena, threw Naruto in as well, and clearly stated that whoever killed the boy, or at least lived when he died, would be set free. Of course, everything had been thrown at the boy, from ninjutsu over genjutsu to taijutsu and projectiles, and Orochimaru was pleased to see that everything failed when Naruto's natural armor sprang to life, covering his body seemingly automatically. Orochimaru was about to have the conspirators executed and the innocent kin set free, when Naruto snapped. Naruto had enough. He was sick of being attacked for no reason, he was sick of being shunned, he was sick of being humiliated. With a primal roar, he jumped forward, into the bulk of his attackers. He had no real strategy, but he didn't need one either. He flung his limbs around, and anyone who came in contact lost flesh. Anyone unfortunate enough to come in contact with his palms immediately died of chakra exhaustion, as every single drop was drained out of him, then some more. The entire onslaught didn't last 3 minutes, then Naruto was the only one standing in a field of corpses, soaked in blood. The only other living being in the arena was Kin, who had backed away to the far wall and collapsed, her legs unable to carry her any longer. Naruto walked to her, still armored, and raised his left hand, the sharp-toothed maw snapping the air as it neared the girl. Kin cried. No, stay away from me. Her feet were pushing into the ground, as she tried to crawl backwards even though the wall blocked her. No, please. I don't want to die. Monster. Stay away. Naruto froze. Then he looked into her eyes. And what he saw woke him from his trance. He saw fear. No, what he saw in Kin's eyes was absolute terror. He saw hopelessness, an incredible horror of what would happen. She was scared of him. She was afraid of his mere presence. Naruto had become like the people in Konoha, terrorizing someone helpless. No, to Kin, he was worse. He was not a human, he was the incarnation of death and slaughter. Naruto looked at her, then he turned around. He walked towards the wall, and used his scales to carve himself footholds and support for his hands to climb up. He looked at Kabuto as his scales receded into his skin, tears running down his face. It's enough. I'm done. Kabuto, who had been watching, nodded. You understand that I can't just let you walk around here, right? He asked. Naruto raised a brow. Could you stop me? Kabuto shrugged. Probably not, but I'd have to try. So please save yourself the trouble and me the pain, and just come quietly. Naruto shrugged and followed. He had left his scroll with his puppets in the cell, and he would never leave without it. It was high time he sealed that scroll in one of the tattoos as well. In Oto, a new rumor had started to go around. It spoke of a creature that Orochimaru had under his control. They said that it resembled a human or large primate, but that it was covered in gray scales. They said it was invincible, its scales harder than steel and absolutely immune to any type of chakra attack. And while the tales of its strength seemed exaggerated, the arena where it was rumored to have slaughtered almost 30 men did show some fresh repairs on a wall that could indeed have been the hand and footholds the creature was supposed to have made with its bare limbs. Some said it had Sharingan eyes, others claimed they were rippled, white like the Hyuga or different in some other way. But one thing they all agreed in was that the eyes were absolutely emotionless, like a machine. Tayuya wasn't one to listen to rumors, most were exaggerated anyways. But all legends have a true core, and in the world of shinobi, an unknown was a very worrying since dangerous variable. In one of Oto's dining halls, she met one of her best friends, Kin. She smiled. Yo Kin, heard you got yourself in quite a fucking mess. Can't leave you out of my sight for a single fucking second, can I? Kin smiled weakly. I still can't believe it myself. One minute I'm sitting in this small bistro you told me about, minding my own business, next the place is swarmed and everybody gets arrested. I still don't know how I got out of there in one piece. Tayuya shrugged. You were innocent, that's how. The fucking tyrant wouldn't kill a loyal servant, why the hell should he? Kin smiled. You're right. So, have you found any boys that got your attention? She teased, knowing that Tayuya hated most of Oto's male population. They were vile, filthy, arrogant, stupid and sexists. One had once said all women were good for was housework and the bedroom. He had later found himself in the medical facility with broken bones. Tayuya frowned. Very funny. I'd rather date dogs than the fucking pigs that run around here. Most don't even know what washing means, and you're hard-pressed to find a fucktard who can actually do more than slobber all over the girls in this shithole. If you want to talk to them about something other than screwing you, you draw blanks. I'm sick of them all. Kin smiled brighter. She still knew how to press her friend's buttons to get amusing results. Sorry for bringing it up. I see your vocabulary is still as colorful as always, so what else is new? Tayuya smiled and picked up the conversation. Things were going normal until Tayuya brought up the newest rumor. Have you heard? They say that the old snake has some new creature at his command. Rumors say it has gray scales and strange eyes. Kin's glass shattered on the floor. All blood had left her face, leaving her pale as a ghost. She grimaced. Tayuya took a second to realize it was supposed to be a smile. Kin, what's wrong? You're white as a sheet, and you're shivering like crazy. Talk to me, what's troubling you? Is it because of that rumor? Kin clutched her shoulders and shivered. She whispered something that sounded like humor. Tayuya looked at her. You have to speak louder, I can't understand what you're telling me. Kin whimpered, then she looked her friend in the eye. It's not a rumor, she whispered. Tayuya's eyes widened. You saw it? Kin nodded. Tayuya's jaw dropped. When? Where? Kin gulped. When I was caught together with those rebels. We were herded into a large arena, then Orochimaru-sama threw what looked like a boy into the arena and said whoever was alive when the boy was dead would be spared. Of course, the rebels fired everything they had, but when the smoke cleared, the scaled creature was sitting there, completely unharmed. They then threw weapons at it, but everything bounced off. Then it roared and attacked. It was horrible. Everyone that touched the skin lost flesh until the bones were visible, but that wasn't the worst part. Everyone it touched with its hands dropped dead to the floor, and one man was grabbed by the throat, and he turned into a dried-up mummy in seconds. In less than 3 minutes, everyone was dead. Then it walked to me. She was obviously traumatized. Tayuya gently patted her back. It's okay. You made it out alive, that's all that matters. If it doesn't hurt too much, how did you escape? Kin sobbed. I didn't. It came towards me, extending its scaled hand to my face. Tayuya, there was a mouth filled with razor-sharp teeth on his palm, and they were gnashing and grinding and seemed really eager to bite me. I was so scared, I just screamed something, I can't remember what. It looked me in the eye, then after a few seconds, it turned around and left. It walked to the walls and carved holes into the rock with his bare hands and feet. Tayuya didn't know what to think. This sounded even crazier than some of the shit she'd heard, yet if she wasn't calling Kin a liar, something the girl definitely wasn't, it had to be true. This was big, really big. She gave Kin another pat on the back. Relax, you made it out. If it wanted to hurt you, it would have. You're fine, and you'll probably never see it again. You said it yourself, it only killed traitors. Kin nodded weakly. I'm going to do anything to ensure that I will never have to face it again. Tayuya smiled. There you go, girl, that's the way. She helped Kin up and turned to leave, before stopping for a second. If you tell anyone that I was all sobby and gentle, I'm gonna beat the fucking shit out of you, are we clear? Kin chuckled. I'll make sure that no harm is done to your bad reputation. Tayuya smirked. That's my girl. Kabuto looked at his master. Orochimaru-sama, forgive my insolence, but why are you allowing rumors about Naruto Uzumaki to spread? Would it not be better if nobody knew of him? I would like to second that question, Karen added. Orochimaru shook his head. There is a simple reason. The rumors describe him as an invincible monster, and my shinobi have started to double and triple their effort in my service as to not face the beast that I hide in my cellar. Did you know that Naruto has already gained a nickname amongst my troops? Karen sighed. Yes, they call him the Chimera. Kabuto shrugged. Well, that's exactly what we're making him. He's a mixture of different people, all with different skills, so I have to say, the name fits. Orochimaru smirked. Yes, it does. Nobody dares betray me now that I have such a monster at my beck and call. And once they learn that I am, or rather will soon be the Chimera, they will all crawl at my feet. I can't wait to see the look in Sensei's eyes when I kill him wearing that face. On that matter, I have decided that he will receive the last 2 injections at the same time. Kabuto frowned. Lord Orochimaru, not to criticize you, but are you sure that's wise? Naruto is probably ready for another shot, and there are only 2 more, but to give him both at the same time? Orochimaru glared at him. I am running out of time. In little more than a year, I have planned an invasion on Konoha to destroy it once and for all, and I want to be in my perfect host by that time. If we wait months before the final injection, then the time we need to train that power afterwards and the time to properly unseal Kyuubi without it going berserk on us will be lost, and I may not be able to fully control the new body by the time the invasion is scheduled. He will receive both solutions today, and you two will train him on how to reflect damage to opponents. Once he's proficient with that, we will unseal the Kyuubi with a special sealing array that is nearly complete, although the concept still needs last improvements. Afterwards I will take over his body. Karen bowed, so that nobody could see her biting her lip. Yes, Orochimaru-sama, she replied. Kabuto was also feeling strangely uncomfortable, but he shrugged it off for now. They had to do some reading on Jashinism, and prepare the solutions and Naruto for the final injection. Naruto was floating in his tank. Getting the injection needle into him had been a pain, as his scales seemed to be an automatic defense as well. In the end, they had managed, after waking Naruto up and begging him to allow them to put it in. They had promised and given him a load of ramen, and swore that it would be the last time, and Naruto had reluctantly agreed. While the other solutions had optically not changed him much, this last one had. The only change that Haiden's immortal body had given him was 2 marks of Jashin on the soles of Naruto's feet, which Kabuto concluded was necessary to quickly conjure the circle needed for the ceremonies. But Setsu had left clear changes on Naruto. Thankfully, he hadn't grown a Venus flytrap around his head, but that was where the good news ended. While not exactly split between black and white, Naruto's skin was now uniquely colored. The left side of his body was pale as a ghost, not as white as Orochimaru but still very pale, while the right half was extremely tanned. Also, the left eye had returned to the cerulean blue it was before, while the right eye had mutated. It seemed to be a little bigger, although that could be an optical illusion since it was always opened wide, lacking an eyelid to close it. There was an eyebrow, but the eye was always uncovered, and moved around even though Naruto was unconscious. It was still rippled, and a number of new tomo had appeared. It looks like the Jubi's eye. Kabuto had a feeling Naruto wouldn't take this new change as well as he had taken the other ones, as he and Karen had noticed that Naruto had always tried to keep a normal appearance as far as it was possible. But now, he no longer had that option. Naruto groaned and grabbed his head. That last operation was a pain. He opened his eyes, and noticed that his hand was very pale. He shrugged. So he lost a bit of color in the last procedure, no big deal, he could live with that. Then he noticed something about his vision. He now saw like he did before he was kidnapped with his left eye, while the right eye still had the vision he had become used to. Also, was he imagining things or did his eyes now move independent from each other? He tried to look in two directions at the same time, and he succeeded. This was weird. Then he noticed that his right eye was staring at his right hand. Was that a hallucination? He held his left hand next to his right hand, and clearly saw the difference. He'd have to be blind not to. He nearly ripped his shirt when he raised it to look at his chest. The color shift between pale and tanned was obvious, and it was not slowly merging into each other, but right in the center of his body, it suddenly shifted, as if someone had cut two people in half, then swapped the halves and stitched them together, only that the stitches were not visible. Kabuto and Karen wailed in, and froze when they saw Naruto staring at himself. Karen cringed as she saw the shock in the boy's left eye, which could finally show emotion once more. Kabuto looked very uncomfortable, and was actually willing to trade lives with anyone if it meant he wouldn't have to be here. This could get ugly. Karen walked to him and patted his back, the natural armor allowing it. Then both of Naruto's eyes focused on Kabuto. Kabuto, get me a mirror. Kabuto started to sweat. Naruto, I really don't think that's a good. Kabuto. Naruto interrupted him. Yes? Naruto looked at him. Get me a mirror. His voice leaving no room to argue. Kabuto sighed. Give me a minute, I don't have one with me. He left, and against better knowledge, he returned with a hand mirror. Naruto grabbed it and saw his face, turned his head to see the right eye, then he set it aside and buried his face in his hands, sobbing. It seemed that his final crutch had broken, as he looked up and asked one question. What am I? Karen blinked. A human, she answered. Naruto looked at her, then he started to giggle, which turned into an insane laughter even as tears ran down his face, interrupted by the occasional sob. Wahahaha. A human? How? Haha so bha. What part of me is human? My bones. He raised his arms and let bone spikes shoot out of them, then he made one drop while the other ones receded back into his arm. My flesh? He grabbed the fallen spike and sliced open his arm. The gray flesh merged back together as soon as the slice was made, the black thread and paper hiding all traces of it ever happening. My hands? The mouths opened, the tongues rolling around. My skin? The scales shot out of his body, Karen jumping back just in time to escape without a cut. My eyes? He grabbed his right eye, then he looked at them. How am I human? Tell me, what part of me is human? Only now Karen and Kabuto fully realized how much of a crutch Naruto's skin had been to him. It had looked like a normal human's, and it was the only thing that was really the same as any human's. Now that Naruto had a coloring that would be nearly impossible to gain naturally, the final connection to humanity had broken. Naruto had been called a monster so many times that a part of him had started to believe it, being overruled by the thought that when Naruto looked into a mirror, he was no different from others. And now he was, and he couldn't take it. His entire existence was suddenly thrown into question, and Naruto was mentally breaking apart. Karen hugged Naruto as soon as the scales had receded into the skin. She looked at him. Naruto. In your heart, you are still a human. Your soul is human. Kabuto nodded. And as for your body, you are what humans dream to be. You are strong, smart, immune to disease, starting to get a resistance to poisons, and you are immortal. The arrogant say that you're less than a human, I say you're more, far more than a normal human. Naruto slowly nodded. It was clear that he didn't fully believe it, but it was enough to hold him straight. He took a deep breath. So, what do you want me to do now? Kabuto calmed himself. We are supposed to try something. He pulled out a vial with a crimson liquid. Can you drink a bit of this with the mouth on your palm? Naruto shrugged and extended his hand, Kabuto dropping a bit of blood in the mouth. Naruto grimaced. I feel kinda sick, is that supposed to happen? Karen frowned. No, it's not. I guess that mouth isn't made for it. Can you drink a gulp of it? Naruto looked at the liquid, eye now filled with distrust. Kabuto sighed. It's not poisonous, Naruto. I can drink a small bit myself if it makes you feel better. He took a sip, opened his mouth so that Naruto could see he had indeed drank some of it, then he swallowed. Naruto nodded, grabbed the vial and emptied it. He spat out the last drops. Was that blood? Karen nodded. Yes, it was. And Naruto, what's going to happen in a few seconds is normal, so please don't freak out. Naruto tilted his head, but then he had a weird feeling. He stretched his legs, although it was more accurate to say that they stretched themselves, the marks at his feet oozing a liquid while he drew a triangle in a circle with his feet and the liquid, which Kabuto would later analyze and see that it was a mixture of Naruto's and the victim's blood. Then a pattern started to emerge on Naruto's skin. On his pale left side, it was pitch black, while his tanned right showed a snow-white pattern. The pattern made his face look like a blank mask with no identifying features. The only oddity was a spot on the forehead, while the rest of the pattern seemed to trace his limbs in simple white lines, making it look as if someone had traced his basic bone structure with a few brush strokes, only that everything was connected and no clear ends were seen, other than the ones where his limbs ended. Naruto looked at himself. This was supposed to happen. I won't stay like this, will I? He asked, unsure. Karen shook her head. The change will revert the moment you step out of the circle, and restart once you re-enter it. It just signifies that the ceremony is in effect. Naruto looked at her. Ceremony? Kabuto nodded. Yes, I'll tell you what it does in a minute, but first, could you take that bone spike you're still holding and ram it in your heart? I know how this sounds, but you're practically immortal, and now immune to physical harm. Naruto looked at him with raised brows, but he didn't really cling to life that much anymore, as if with his humanity, he had lost part of his will to live. So he raised the spike and slammed it into him. It stinged, but there was no overbearing pain. Suddenly, he felt as if a cold shudder had gone through him. Then it was over, and Naruto's skin reverted to what he would have to call normal. What was that? Kabuto twitched. The ceremony for the honor of the god Jashin is simple. It works by drinking the victim's blood. A single drop is enough. Then a circle is drawn, the Jashinist staying in it. As long as he remains in the circle, all damage done to the Jashinist will be reflected onto the victim, meaning they get the same damage, although if the victim is hurt, it doesn't happen to the Jashinist as well. The ceremony can be interrupted when the Jashinist leaves the circle, but as soon as he re-enters it, the effect starts again. There are only two ways the ceremony can end. Either the circle is destroyed, in which case the Jashinist needs another drink of blood to make a new one, or the victim dies. Naruto's eyes widened. You mean someone died because of what I did? Karen and Kabuto nodded their heads. Naruto dropped to the floor. Orochimaru looked at a monitor showing Naruto's room, a habit he had started to develop, looking at his new body to be. The boy was certainly surprising, both positively and negatively. He learned quicker than anything Orochimaru had ever seen, although he suspected the Sharingan might have a positive effect on the boy's learning curve, and built strong but not bulky muscle in mere hours, something he accredited to the combination of Kyuubi and Jugo. The not-so-good part was that Naruto had made it impossible to extract any sperm. He blatantly refused to impregnate a woman, and Orochimaru had shown him pictures of any woman he had. Hell, he had even mixed in pictures of people he didn't have, like Tsunade, and while the boy obviously liked their looks, he still refused to do the deed. Worse yet, thanks to Jugo's mutation abilities, he had retracted and effectively dissolved his reproductive organs, making any attempt of sperm extraction a waste of time. Orochimaru looked closer into the screen. He frowned. The boy was messing around with the scalpel, but there was nothing to use it on. Except. No! Orochimaru howled with rage when he saw Naruto thrust the blade into his right eye. He jumped up and ran towards the room where the boy was held, intending to save the irreplaceable eye. In front of Naruto's room, Kabuto and Karen were playing poker, ignoring the tragedy that was happening. They looked at Orochimaru, bowed and returned to their game. What are you two doing? Orochimaru asked, irritated. We are playing a card game, Orochimaru-sama. Kabuto stated dryly, before adding to Karen raised 200. Orochimaru's eye gained a dangerous twitch. While you two are playing games, my precious host is mutilating himself. Karen didn't look up. He's been doing that for the last 3 days. Call raise 500. And you aren't stopping him? Orochimaru asked in disbelief. Kabuto shrugged. We tried, he raised his scales, we lost flesh. It hurt. Eventually, we just gave up. Call. Orochimaru glared at them. He's goring his right eye. Karen frowned. Again? That makes what, 26 times? Raise 500. 27. Orochimaru-sama, what you don't know is that Naruto heals everything. In the last 3 days, he has also cut himself to shreds, broke his own bones, used the scales on his arms to shave his face to the bone and self-amputated something 9 times, including 2 decapitations. The only thing his body really didn't like was the amputations, where it grew threads to reconnect, although I believe he could just regenerate the limbs. His body simply chooses what takes less energy. In fact, his pain tolerance is baffling, I've never seen anything like it. Call. Show your hand. Karen laid down her cards. 4 of a kind aces. Kabuto whistled. Not bad. He showed his hand. Straight flush, clubs, 4 to 8. Son of a bitch. Karen cursed. Orochimaru calmed down and retreated. What he had just heard was even better than he'd hoped. With Naruto as a host, he'd be invincible. Who cared if the boy hurt himself, if it didn't leave any marks? Certainly not he. Whistling a happy tune, Orochimaru retreated to his domain. He had decided that he'd take over Naruto in 4 days, 2 days after the Kyuubi would be extracted. Kabuto and Karen returned to Naruto's cell. Naruto looked at them. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. Kabuto sighed. Orochimaru-sama has developed a jutsu with which he can permanently take over other bodies in his quest for immortality. While he was a member of a group of ninja equal and superior to himself, he found that 2 of them combined would offer eternal life. But he got greedy and desired a perfect host with the abilities of all the members of said group. With time and patience, he gathered genetic samples. But that was when the problem started. As I told you before, nobody but you survived. Now you have all the samples, and you have reached a decent level of skill with them, so Orochimaru-sama has decided that tomorrow, the Kyuubi will be extracted from you, as it would destroy him if he were to take you over with it still in you. Then, after 2 days of recovery, he will take over your body. Naruto looked at him. So this is how it ends, huh? Just like that. Kabuto shrugged. I'm afraid so. I'll miss you, you were fascinating. He had purposefully chosen such a vague way of expressing himself, as the next step would be really risky and very well cost him his head. Karen hugged him. Then she looked at him. I guess this is farewell. Naruto nodded. Goodbye, you too. I guess I grew attached to you. It feels nice to have a proper goodbye. Kabuto smiled. By the way, you didn't get it that bad with your skin. Zetsu, the man who the sample is from, has a pitch black and a snow-white side, and a giant Venus flytrap around his head. But then again, if you can sink through solid matter and travel the greatest distances in seconds, looks aren't that worrying. Goodbye, Naruto. Naruto looked at them. Goodbye. Once Karen and Kabuto left the cell, they started a small conversation. A shame, isn't it? He had such talent. Perhaps we could have given him some more before we parted ways forever. Kabuto said. It was a code between him and Karen, meaning did he get it? Karen answered. Yeah, but what can you do? His fates are decided, and all we can do is wait and study Orochimaru once he's in control. The only important word in that speech was the first one, as it answered the unspoken question. Naruto was far too special to end like that. Naruto pondered over the last goodbye. Karen had slid a scroll in his shirt, which he had immediately sealed in one of the tattoos, and slipped a bit of clay into his hand. The resident mouth had swallowed it immediately, keeping it in until it was needed. Kabuto's words had also struck a chord. He had indirectly told him how to escape. The walls were filled with seals and therefore not an option, but did the same count for the floor as well? He leaned back, making sure his body was covering his hand, and tried to make it merge with the stone to let him pass. When he noticed a rejection, he tried looking with his right eye. Yep, the floor was lined with chakra, so no pass. He could try to tamper with the seals, but that might trigger an alarm. Instead, he went for the operation table where he made human puppets. As he had expected, it only had a few minor seals, probably to keep it clean. Naruto traced over the seal with his fingers, letting small scales grow on the tips, and watched with fascination as the chakra was practically sucked out of the seal until it was nothing more than a few scratches and ink. He laid his body on the table, something he had started to do a few weeks ago, so it wouldn't be suspicious, and tried to make his fingers sink into the table. It took 2 hours, but he made it. Now he had to extend the feeling, letting his entire body sink into the ground. But just when Naruto thought he had it, he heard a sharp hiss, and the world turned blurry. This was obviously new stuff, as Naruto grew resistant if not immune to anything he had been subjugated to at least once, even if the ingredients were dosed differently. He knew that all he had were seconds before he was lost, and focused all his mental strength into sinking into the table. He managed, and had to make a split-second decision where he wanted to be. The choice he made was easy, obvious, and a fair distance away from Orochimaru. Sarutobi was enjoying a good pipe, for the moment free of any paperwork that needed looking through. His thoughts wandered to the boy who had vanished over 3 years ago, Naruto Uzumaki. When Kushina had appeared before him after getting his letter, pissed would not do her mood justice. She had been downright furious. He still had a scar on his shoulder from that argument, although beatdown would be more precise. He had never seen her that angry. Hell may have no wrath like a woman scorned, but Earth was more resourceful. Earth had pissed mothers. Shaking himself from those unpleasant thoughts, he wondered if he would ever see the boy again. Just as he finished his pipe, the secretary showed up and placed a giant stack of paper in front of him. Sarutobi sighed and grabbed for his stamp, when something that nearly gave him a heart attack happened. Something big dropped from the ceiling, landing right on the stacks. His first thought was what a shame, Now all the paperwork is damaged, therefore invalid. Pity. Directly followed by where the hell did this come from? And what is this? The ANBU that always watched him jumped into action and surrounded the downed object. The leader looked around. Uma, you were closest. Where did that come from and why didn't we notice it sooner? The horse-masked man shrugged. I don't know. It wasn't there, then I noticed something sink out of the ceiling, then it dropped. Sarutobi decided to take a look at what they were dealing with. He approached the table, prepared to jump back and form a jutsu should he have to, but there was no attack. On the table before him was a boy. He only saw a very pale hand and a mop of blonde hair, although a closer look showed a few red, brown, black, green, blue and silver streaks. For some reason, the boy seemed familiar. Then the boy turned his head slightly, and Sarutobi looked into a cerulean blue eye that stood out of the pale face like a blue moon in a white sky. Sarutobi gasped. The boy's lip twitched. It was probably supposed to be a smile. Then he spoke. I'm sorry, Gigi. I didn't know where else to. Then the eye closed, and the boy lost consciousness. Sarutobi looked at the doctor. He had ordered to analyze a genetic sample from the boy that landed on his desk, expectation clearly visible on his face. He was already completely sure that it was Naruto, but being the Hokage required that one double and triple checked everything. The doctor cleared his throat. Before I come to the result of the genetic analysis, I'd like to mention something else, Hokage-sama, namely the enormous difficulty we had in getting genetic material to analyze. The boy has an automatic defense of sorts, consisting of hard, sharp scales that seem to instantly grow from his body whenever there is a threat to his well-being, even to the relatively harmless one of a needle. We didn't do further studies on the boy, as our orders were to merely take a sample and analyze it without inflicting any harm on him, although I would suggest further studies, so we eventually settled on using the boy's saliva for our analysis. Sarutobi frowned. Those scales, as well as the boy's right eye, were something that made him nervous. What had happened to Naruto? And the results? He asked. The doctor scratched his head. Honestly? If you handed us the samples without saying anything, I would have come to the conclusion that they belonged to a distant cousin of Naruto's. Sarutobi's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? The doctor shrugged. We found sections that matched with Naruto Uzumaki, but many parts of the DNA don't match with Naruto's DNA code. Out of sheer bored curiosity, I ran a check to compare them with other samples we have, mostly of the major clans, and interestingly enough, I got a few matching segments with the DNA of the Uchiha, the greatest similarities with Itachi. There were a number of other segments that didn't belong to Naruto nor Itachi, but I didn't get any further matches, suggesting that, should people that match those large patches exist, they are not native to Konoha. Also, there is no seal on Naruto's stomach, and if a chakra analysis hadn't detected traces of the Kyuubi's tainted chakra, I would clearly file it as a case of mistaken identity. But like this? I really can't tell you if it is Naruto Uzumaki or not. My suggestion would be to ask questions only the real Naruto could answer, as a mind probing would be too dangerous for those who try should it really turn out to be Naruto. Sarutobi nodded, remembering the last time a member of the Yamanaka clan had tried to use their clan's jutsu on Naruto. A group of 7 had tried to control the boy's body to force him to do something that would give them an excuse to kill him. 7 people had entered his mind. 1 had managed to return to her body, traumatized and incapable of coherent speech. When she was found, she had been sitting in a corner sobbing for hours, 6 empty shells around her. And Noichi had personally dived into her mind to find out what happened, and returned gasping for breath. He reported that when the 7 had entered Naruto's mind, they had triggered a hidden function of the seal that was meant to protect it, and Naruto and landed on the wrong side of the seal, right in the cage with the Kyuubi, who had proceeded to rip 6 of them to shreds, literally, while letting the woman go to spread the warning. Needless to say, there were no further attempts of that kind. Sarutobi finally made his decision. When he wakes, I'll go see him. I'll be accompanied by a squad of ANBU, including Tora. Personally, I have no doubt that it is Naruto Uzumaki, but it is better to be on the safe side. The question I really want answered is what happened to him. Meanwhile, in Naruto's room, one of the doctors stood above the unconscious figure, a look of utter hatred etched on his face. He had a scalpel in his hand. You should have stayed in Hell, Demon, but I'll correct that mistake, he hissed as he brought the blade down. Suddenly the right eye stopped rolling in the socket, and completely focused on him. At the same time, the right arm, now scaled, shot up and swiped the blade out of the doctor's hand. The doctor hissed in pain and grabbed his hand. The space between pinky and wrist had been stripped of flesh to the point that the naked bone was visible. He used a quick healing jutsu, before forming chakra scalpels. So you want to play rough, demon scum? Have it your way then. He charged the surprisingly still unconscious boy, when something else happened. The right arm, still covered in gray scales and suddenly with a shark teeth-filled maw on the palm, shot at him, actually extending and hitting him in the shoulder before he could reach the boy, clawing into his flesh. The doctor felt all strength leave him, the chakra scalpels fading away, and with his last strength yanked himself free, gaining a large gap in his shoulder. Being a good enough doctor to understand that he was not only deprived of practically all chakra, but also bleeding badly, retreated into the empty hallway, and from there into the elevator, cursing the entire time. That little demon was better than I thought. No matter, with a wound like this, not to mention his demonic transformations, I have more than enough to show him for what he truly is, and then he will die. But the doctor had overlooked a few key details. While he couldn't be blamed for not noticing that Naruto's right hand that had bit him had been chewing something for hours, as he hadn't seen the palm, not noticing that something had been pumped into him from said mouth was something he as a doctor shouldn't have missed. Also, since he never looked back, he didn't see the scales vanishing back into the arm, while the left arm slowly rose as well, both hands starting to form a single hand sign, consisting of extended middle and index fingers. Even though the activation word was not spoken, the gruesome effect occurred. The doctor's eyes widened as he felt a weird dullness from his shoulder. He turned his head, only to see himself disintegrating. His arm had already fallen to the floor with a thumb, vanishing faster than he would have thought possible, but that was not his most urgent problem. The problem was that he could see his ribcage, that his right lung had a gaping hole large enough that a football could be placed in it without even scraping against the edges, and that the disintegration had proceeded up his neck and to his nose. The world turned black as his eyes decomposed. This can't be happening, the doctor thought. Then, he didn't think anything. When the elevator opened, the nurse that was about to enter frowned. Before her was a heap of empty clothing, a doctor's coat with a hole and traces of blood on the shoulder being the most distinctive. She looked around, but deciding that it had to be a prank of sorts, she started to collect the clothes. There was nothing too unusual about the stack, until she took the shoes. One of them was heavier than the other. She looked into the shoe and screamed. A lone foot was sticking in it, ending just before the ankle. Naruto groaned. The last thing he remembered was Jig's face, something he had deeply welcomed after all that Orochimaru had put him through, then blackness. But according to his, admittedly slightly hazy, memory, he had been in the office, and while he was no longer naive enough to believe they would leave him there, he had expected the hospital, or at least a detainment quarter, and neither of those places were supposed to be this damp. He opened his eyes, or rather eye, seeing that the other one was permanently open, and looked around. His first impression was short. It was dark, it was cold, it was wet. All in all, not where he wanted to be. Then he noticed a light coming from around the corner. While he moved towards it, a single thought crossed his mind. Why do I get the feeling that going towards the light is a bad move? He turned around the corner, and was standing in front of a giant cage, a small tag with the kanji for seal on it. In the cage, Naruto could see the biggest fox he had ever and in all likelihood would ever see. Suddenly, the question he had asked himself a second ago was no longer an issue, because he had the answer. Oh. Because it is. The red eye focused on him, and Naruto thought he saw a glint of amusement in that giant eye. So this is my vessel? I must say, I like what I see. He has already a darker mindset than most humans that age, and he is very powerful. The word human was spoken with something akin to disgust. Naruto's brow twitched. Would the stupid fox mind not talking as if I were not present or unable to understand coherent speech? Kyuubi chuckled. And he has guts too, another plus. So far, the only negative I see is that he's the brat of the one who sealed me in here, but I'm starting to see my imprisonment a lot more relaxed than before. Naruto blinked, the gears turning in his head. The one who sealed you. My father? The yondaime is. Kyuubi snorted. Your father. Of course I can't be completely certain, but I would bet my tails that he is. When he charged me on that Toadyu in arms, it looked like he was carrying a small clone of himself. The same eyes, the same hair, the same facial structure. Naruto looked at him. Who is my mother? Kyuubi blinked. How in the 9 circles of Tartarus and the Shinigamis thrown on top am I supposed to know? Do recall, I spent less than an hour in your silly barrier that doesn't block anything, and never actually entered that village, so how am I supposed to know anything about your family? It's not like I ever bothered to mingle with your kind. Suddenly Kyuubi seemed to recall something. Well, there was this one person, but that was different. He had long transcended humanity, even defeating, but that's beside the point. I never cared enough about humanity to bother with names, except the really strong ones. Since we're on the topic, you seem to have transcended humanity in your own way. Naruto frowned. It's not like you could mingle with humanity, even if you wanted to. I don't imagine too many humans wanting to talk to a giant fox. Kyuubi rolled his eyes. I would be a poor excuse of a demon and a kitsune if I couldn't even turn into a human. With that, the entire cage seemed to vanish in a red whirlpool that shrunk, until it was hardly bigger than Naruto, 2 heads at most. Then it solidified into a shape, and Naruto's jaw dropped. Why you're a woman? He stuttered. Kyuubi's eyes rolled. Her voice was much softer, it had a tone that lulled one into what was definitely a false sense of security. Yes, I know. And I must say, I like the way the seal is like this much better, although you have to do something about the room. Mind you, the blood is a wonderful touch, but a little comfort is not too much to ask for. Naruto blinked. Blood? Instead of answering, Kyuubi pointed down. What Naruto had believed to be water was really blood. He was standing in a stream of blood. He looked up at Kyuubi, who was suddenly less than 2 heads taller than him. He blushed. Kyuubi was, there was no other description, a bombshell. Perfect hourglass figure, long blood-red hair going down her back, 2 fox ears of the same color twitching on top of her head. Her D-cup cleavage was hardly hidden by the tight red kimono with the fox pattern that seemed much too short, not only showing off her bust, but also her long, toned legs. Behind her, Naruto could see 9 tails swishing around. Her face looked to belong to a goddess, with soft features and crimson, slitted eyes that didn't seem menacing, but gave you the feeling that she was looking down on you with superior amusement. Around her neck was a necklace made of what looked to be black pearls and white magatama, think Inuyasha's necklace, with a large white orb holding the kanji for seal inside of it on the front section, strung between 2 black pearls on each side. Kyuubi noticed a glance to the necklace. Like it? Thanks to all the mutations, I was able to tweak around a bit with the seal. Sadly, its functions remain unchanged and it undamaged, but at least I can move around more freely. What's wrong? Naruto had turned away from her, clutching his right eye as if wanting to rip it out of the socket. Kyuubi grabbed him, spun him around and lifted him off the ground by the collar. Look at me. Why are you turning your head away from me? It seemed very disrespectful, and Kyuubi hated disrespect. The only reason she attacked Konoha was that those pests had swarmed and attacked her when she was on one of her travels, and she decided that the quickest way to get rid of the pesky ants was to squash the anthill. In hindsight, it would have been better if she had just got it over with, but she had thought that watching them squirm was kinda funny. Shikaka had told her that her habit to play with her food would one day get her in real trouble. Anyways, Kyuubi's patience with the boy was wearing thin. Answer me, or I'll strangle you with your own guts. Naruto looked to the side. I'm not supposed to be here. Kyuubi blinked. What? This was his mindscape. If anyone shouldn't be there, it would be her. Not that she wanted to be here. Well, the boy had suddenly become very interesting, but that was beside the point. Speaking of the boy, his face was now amusing to watch, as the deep blush that covered it gave both skin colors an interesting tone, although it was much easier to spot on the formerly pale side. Naruto still kept his eyes glued to the side, the left eye that Kyuubi could see was filled with pain. Look at us. She followed his gaze, and saw their reflection in the blood. You are perfect. Naruto continued. A beauty in every sense of the word. He stared at his reflection, at the skin, at the eye. A freak. An abomination, a monster. I'm hideous. I don't belong in this world. Kyuubi looked at him. You have a rather unique tan and an unusual eye, that much I'll admit. Still, I honestly don't see a problem. Naruto stared at her. Look at me. I'm disgusting, a mockery of human life. Kyuubi shrugged. Human life is vastly overrated. And you don't even have to start about beautiful or ugly, I'm a demon. Your human values of what's beautiful or not is beyond my comprehension. Sure, it's nice if a mate doesn't look too strange and doesn't smell too bad, but for any fiend, devil or demon, that's really just unnecessary decoration. Nice, but it works just as well without it. For our kinds, the most important thing, and really the only thing that will really affect the views of you, is strength. Demons, fiends, devils, we are all the same in that point. Our mate can be uglier than dung in human eyes, his strength is what makes him attractive. Take succubi and incubi as examples. They are, by human standards, probably the most beautiful things you'll ever see, still most of them, there are exceptions, are looked down upon because of their weakness. It's not they feed on humans, many species, like vampires or my good old friend Shikaku, consider humans a delicacy, though personally I never understood why. The problem is that most succubi are reliant on the energy they harvest from humans. You don't understand that yet, but feasting on humans to survive is, by our standards, a step below eating out of a dumpster. You don't do it unless you're weak or desperate. In the latter case, it's usually temporary, and not something one wants to talk about when stronger. Since we're on the topic, that last shot altered you in a way that allows you to digest raw meat, and it seems that the most energy can be gained out of human flesh. Naruto paled. I'm not going to eat people. Kyubi waved him off. Trust me, it only gets easier after the first time. And I never said you had to eat everyone, although it would be funny. It's merely another option for you, and a great way to freak out enemies. I once knew a vampire that. Naruto interrupted her. I get it. Now let me go. Kyubi grinned. Make me. Naruto's scales extended. Kyubi was surprised that even in his mind, those scales actually drained her Yuki, although she regenerated the stuff almost as fast as she lost it. When Naruto saw that it wasn't enough, his left arm shot forward, hitting her hard in the shoulder, forcing her to drop him and jump back. In complete disbelief, she stared at her shoulder, then behind her. I don't believe it! With a single hit, he stripped me of one of my tails. And not just those weak, watered-down cloak tails, but an actual bijou tail. It'll take over an hour to regenerate it. And despite Yuki being pretty strong stuff, not to mention that since it was involuntarily stripped from me it should have turned into finest malice, he seems to be just fine and hungry for more. Actually, I don't think that there is any amount of energy he would be unable to absorb. Only a limit on how much per second, and I'm not even sure on that. Let's see, with a single short, split-second contact, he stripped a tail from me. Assuming that it wasn't the secondary limit, including the difference in concentration of Yuki in my tails compared to other demons, then doubling the amount since he has 2 maws that can eat, subtracting a certain percentage since I am trapped inside of him, and the seal is designed to give him access, that would mean holy shit, if my calculation is correct, he can devour a 3-tailed demon in one go. Still, I'm working with a lot of variables, what-ifs and estimated numbers, so I can't be completely sure until he actually faces one. Still, he just became a lot more attractive as a potential mate. Kyubi walked around him, looking at him from scalp to toe, scratching her chin. Naruto got more nervous, causing his scales to shiver, making a sound not unlike the warning of the rattlesnake, and it probably served the same purpose. What are you doing? He asked. Kyubi tilted her head. I'm evaluating your potential as a mate, and so far, you certainly passed the test to go into the category serious consideration. Naruto's face seemed to be 50% pink and 50% deep red, as the blush deepened. WWW what? And mate? Me? But I'm. Kyubi rolled her eyes. Don't start with the hideous story again, I already told you that nobody but humans gives a shit about looks. Naruto blinked. Still, what if I like someone else? You can't just decide that on your own. Kyubi raised her hand. 3 things. First of all, sure I can. The index finger rose. Secondly, since I am in your mind, you can't lie to me that easily. We both know you have nobody that you love. The middle finger rose, followed by the ring finger, and finally, even if you found someone who loved you back, who says I have a problem with that? Naruto blinked. Run that by me again, I must have misheard you. For demons, fiends and devils, polygamy is not only accepted, but encouraged. You see, much of someone's strength can be measured by the number and strength of his, or her, mates, though most females are too possessive to take more than one mate at a time, but whoever is dominant can get more than one mate. So if someone can keep a number of strong mates, then he or she is very powerful, which in turn reflects well on said mates, for having gained a powerful partner. This goes especially if the mates are completely different species or even natural enemies. Someone who has both an Frost Devil and an Inferno Fiend as a mate is obviously very powerful, not only because he gained them, but he is able to keep them from killing each other. So I really wouldn't care much if you gained another mate. In fact, there are very fun things that can only be done with another woman, whether just 2 girls or a 3 or moresome. That would actually be the ultimate show of power, to have an orgy with 2, or even more, total opposites at the same time, especially if one can get them to play nice, well relatively nice, with each other. Kyubi explained, her mind wandering to faraway times, with a few friends, a bit of one of mankind's only good inventions, concentrated alcohol, and a lot of free time. That alcohol couldn't actually do any harm to them, that there were no hangovers, and that the stupor could be shaken off instantly if necessary were only a few more pluses on the long list of why it's great to not be human. Naruto meanwhile had blushed to an impressive shade of crimson, on both sides of his face, that it was almost funny to look at. Kyubi chuckled to herself. It was fun to tease the boy. And it wasn't like she was going to jump him the next second for a ride. It was completely possible she would eventually, but not yet. He showed a lot of strength and even greater potential, but currently, he hadn't quite met the standards that she had. Not that she was surprised, only a single being born human had ever been good enough for a few very great years, before he followed the road of all things mortal, voluntarily no less. Still, it had been fun while it lasted. She looked at Naruto. Don't get ahead of yourself, you're still far, far away from that prize. And since you are obviously too busy, can I redecorate this place? It won't have any effects on your mind, It'll just be a bit more comfortable for those who spend great amounts of time here, such as myself. Naruto could only nod, still incapable of speech due to all the information he had received in a short amount of time, not to mention the topic of a good part of said information. Kyuubi waved dismissively. That should be enough for a day's worth of revelations, so for now, be gone. Naruto felt himself fade away, as he left his mindscape and re-entered the realm of the living. Kakashi stood before the memorial stone, once again contemplating his failures. He had lost his comrade, Obito Uchiha, just when he'd learned to like him. He had lost his sensei, Minato Namikaze, when the Kyuubi attacked. And his most recent failure, he had lost Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, his sensei's son that he should have kept an eye on, especially on October 10th, when the sake flowed, the anger rose and the intelligence sunk. Because he had not watched over him, Naruto had vanished, abducted by an unknown perpetrator. He looked up when he noticed a presence behind him. He turned around to see Tenzo, a colleague and fellow squad member from his ANBU days. He raised a hand. Yo, what's up? Tenzo's brow raised. You mean you haven't heard the rumor, senpai? Kakashi furrowed his brows. What rumor? Tenzo looked at him disbelievingly, then he remembered that the rumor had only recently spread beyond the ranks of the ANBU, so it was entirely possible Kakashi had missed the news. Almost sad considering the fact that there was only one person in the village that would be happier with that information. Like I said, it's just a rumor amongst the ANBU, although it finally seeped through to the general population, but they say that Naruto Uzumaki is back. For a second, Kakashi stood as if petrified. Then he found his voice. If this is a joke, you're dead. An instant later, he was gone. Kushina woke up in the stillness of the Namikaze compound. The clan had been dying out, and while Minato hadn't been the last one, he had been one of the last, and when the Kyuubi had attacked, they had valiantly fought it at the cost of their own lives. The last Namikaze, the hope they had fought and died for, had at the time been sleeping under Kushina's heart for almost 9 months, before the stress brought her into premature labor. Without Tsunade, who had managed to temporarily beat her hemophobia long enough to bring both mother and child through the process alive, although it had been close for her, she would not have made it. Any other doctor, and she would have died. Still, on the inside she had died that day, when her child was gone and it was reported that her husband had died. Sarutobi had found her in her weakest moment, nearly maddened by the loss of her beloved and the worry for her child. When Sarutobi had told her that her son was dead, she had fallen apart. As soon as she could walk on her own, she packed her things and left, ignoring all begging not to. She was done with Konoha, which had become nothing more than pain for her. Painful memories of the good times with Minato, and painful images of the times they had planned to spend with their child. How they would bring him to the playground, how they would treat him to his first bowl of the wonderful Ichiraku ramen, how he eventually would become a shinobi and make her go mad with worry while Minato would have encouraged him, how he would have told them of the missions he did, complain about the blasted cat that they weren't allowed to actually blast, and later about how he defeated bandits and helped others. Kushina simply couldn't bear living on, watching mothers with their children that reminded her of what could have been. She had sworn herself to never take a single step into Konoha again. And she had kept her word, until that fateful day she received a letter from Sarutobi. She had read it, before ripping it to shreds and grabbing her trusted sword and a few other things she sealed into a scroll, and marched towards the village hidden in the leaves. Her meeting with Sarutobi was one the old man was unlikely to forget. Flashback. Kushina waltzed to the door leading to that old monkey's office. The secretary bravely tried to stop her. You can't go in there, the Hokage is in a meeting. Kushina had looked at her, causing the woman to shrink together into herself. Do I look like I give a shit? The secretary wisely moved out of the way, and stood before the door. She decided to skip the knocking. Sarutobi had been in a fierce discussion with Hayashi, Inoichi and the elders, when the door flew open, kicked in by a heel boot. In the doorway, like a dark angel of vengeance, stood Kushina, murder in her eyes. Sarutobi, we have to talk. Everybody else out. Hayashi was shocked to see one of his old friends, one that he firmly believed would never again show her face in Konoha. Kushina, what are you doing here? Danzo was less amused. Who do you think you are? You may have been the Yandame's wife. Nobody bothered to ask how he knew that, but to barge into a meeting like this is highly. Kushina interrupted him, barely contained anger rolling off her in waves. I said out? That includes the ANBU hiding on the ceiling and in the corners. Now. Danzo wisely shut up and left as quickly as he could, the others following his example, said ANBU leaving as well. Even Sarutobi tried to leave, but Kushina grabbed him by the scruff of the neck and unceremoniously threw him against his desk. He cleverly activated the soundproofing seals before he started to talk. Now, Kushina, I know you're displeased with my actions, and probably upset and angry, but. Kushina stared at him, her voice dangerously quiet. Angry? Upset? Displeased? Sarutobi, I was displeased when Minato didn't show up to one of our dates. I was slightly peeved when you didn't show up to our wedding. I was very peeved when Jiraiya did show up to our wedding, crashing the party. I was upset when I learned that Jiraiya had based a woman in his smut on me. I was angry when I found scenes from our wedding night and said book. Right now I am furious. Sarutobi started to sweat when he saw her hand inching towards her trusted blade. Kushina, I couldn't tell you about Naruto, you were in no sane condition. In your state, you might have attacked high ARGH. The sword had pierced his shoulder. Kushina's face was a grimace of rage. How dare you? How dare you even suggest I would hurt my child? Sarutobi hissed in pain. The strike had been well aimed, bypassing everything that might have caused lasting damage and avoiding the bone. Kushina, take the sword out. I am still a Kage, and while I understand your actions, if you don't pull it out right now, you will be executed. Kushina's eyes wavered, and if she didn't have the hope that Naruto was still out there somewhere, she would have doubtlessly pulled until her sword would have left the old man through the other shoulder, but she pulled her blade out. Sarutobi used a healing jutsu to fix the worst damage, although a scar would remain. You understand nothing, she hissed. How could you understand my pain? I wasn't in sane condition? What would you have been in? My husband dead, my child nowhere to be found, and I can't even go look for him because I'm too weak to leave the bed. Tears were running down her face. He was all I had, Sarutobi, the only family I had left, and he was gone. Only now did Sarutobi really understand how he had wronged her. Kushina, She stared at him, tears running down her face, as she slapped him in the face. You took him away from me, you lied to me. You left me thinking he was dead, while all this time she couldn't talk, he framed shaken by sobs. Sarutobi felt the strong urge to beat himself to a pulp. If there is anything I can do. Kushina roared as she jumped at him and started to beat on every inch of him he could reach. What you can do? What you can do? Haven't you done enough? You told me he was dead. You told Tsunade, his godmother, he was dead. She had just overcome her fear of blood, and when you told her he died, it came back since she thought that she was doomed to fail no matter what. You stole our future from us, Sarutobi. Sarutobi protected his vitals, but nothing else. He felt that he deserved every last hit. Kushina's fists rained on him, and he felt some bones creak, but he couldn't say anything as Kushina went on, only interrupted by numerous sobs. Because of you, Sarutobi, I missed my son's life. I missed his first step, I missed his first word. I missed his first birthday, and all other ones as well. I didn't get to hold him, I didn't get to calm him when he was screaming, I didn't take care of him when he was ill, I never cooked for him. I wasn't there to help him up when he stumbled, I never got to hug him, never kissed him, never got to tell him that I loved him. I missed his first bowl at Ichiraku's, I didn't buy him his first shuriken, I wasn't there when he entered the academy, I never saw him practice, or gave him pointers. I never met his friends, I never got to scold him, never got to praise him, I never got to be his mother. I don't even know his voice. Her voice, which had been filled with grief and sobs, was suddenly filled with anger once more. Because of your lie, I missed 8 years of my son's life, Sarutobi, 8 years. If you want to do something for me, then give me back those 8 years, Sarutobi. Her hits were getting weaker, as Kushina simply didn't have any more strength. Give them back to me. Give me what you took away. Give me back my son. He's all that she slumped together on the floor, unable to do anything but cower there, wailing and crying her heart out. Sarutobi looked at her. Once she had been known as Yuzu's Crimson Death, an S-rank shinobi that Kumo fled from on sight. Now she was just a broken mother that never truly saw her only child, laying before the one who took that last thing away from her. She had lost her home and her family to a mix of natural disasters and a joint effort of Kumo and IWA, lost the love of her life to the Kyuubi, and the last thing she had, her son, because of the arrogance of an old man who thought he knew everything, yet couldn't even recognize a distraught and desperate mother. For the first time in his life, Sarutobi truly felt old. Had she grabbed her sword this instant to cut him down, he would not have tried to block. He would not have dodged. He would have welcomed the blade with open arms, embracing the punishment. But Kushina didn't draw her sword. She just lay there, sobbing and whispering her child's name. It wasn't his death that she wanted, and Sarutobi's death would not have lessened her pain. No, the only thing that could ease her suffering was the one thing he could not give her. He had had 8 years to fix his mistake, to make up for his lie and give Naruto the parent the boy had desperately craved, and he had done nothing. Now it was too late. He felt a painful sting in his heart when he realized that he, someone who was supposed to be a friend, had hurt her more than any of her enemies had ever managed. They had destroyed her country and killed her family. He had betrayed her trust, and that was something none of her enemies could have ever done. He had lied to her face, he had stolen her only family from her, and he never told her until the child had vanished, leaving Kushina in the terrible knowledge that her child grew up without her, that he wouldn't even know her, and that even now that she knew he was alive, she was unable to be with him, she didn't even get to see him. And all because of him. Before Kushina could tell herself that her son was in heaven with his father, but now that small solace was stripped from her, replaced by the most horrible thing there is for parents, insecurity. Was Naruto alright? Was he being driven to madness by his tenant? Was he being trained to become a heartless murderer? Was he sick? Was he hurt? Was he being tortured? Was he dying, calling for his mother that couldn't come to help? Was he even still alive, or had Sarutobi's lie become a prophecy? Sarutobi wondered if it wouldn't have been better to leave Kushina in the belief her son died after birth. Because he wanted to make himself feel better, he had taken the little piece of mind Kushina still had away from her. He cursed himself for his weakness and his arrogance that had led to this situation. He couldn't look at Kushina. "I'm sorry." That was all he managed to say. 20 minutes later, a secretary holding a stash of paper entered, and was shocked at what he saw. Kushina had managed to sit up, leaning against the wall, with her face buried in her hands, her eyes seemingly devoid of life as tears flowed. But what really caught the secretary's attention was Sarutobi, who was in a bad shape. His nose was broken, 4 ribs cracked, his lip was busted, his left eye was swelling shut, and he was black, blue, and bloodied all over. Still, he refused any medical attention, stating that the only one who gets to heal these wounds is time, and that only because I can't stop it. He then looked at Kushina, before turning to the secretary. "Kushina here is to be given unlimited access to all information pertaining to Naruto Uzumaki, is that clear?" The woman nodded and Sarutobi left, only turning around once more. "Kushina, Minato left everything to you." Then he turned around, feeling incredibly tired. He knew that Kushina would send a large number of people to the hospital once she read the files, doctors and nurses included, but for the first time in his life, he couldn't bring himself to care. End of flashback. Kushina had indeed gone on a rampage, giving the hospital, or those amongst the employees that didn't land on the list of patients, a lot of work. After that was done, she had returned to Sarutobi and given the old man a beating he would never forget. Eventually she had calmed down somewhat, and moved into Minato's compound. Still, every day became a torture for her, the uncertainty, worry and memories threatening to overwhelm her. She had lost count of the days she cried herself to sleep, driven near madness because the only thing she could do was pray. She noticed a presence in her garden and looked up. It was Yugogo, one of the girls she had personally taught a few things. "What is it?" she asked. Yugogo was clearly out of breath. "Kushina-sama, I didn't want to bother you before I made sure, but now I heard it from an eyewitness." Kushina frowned, a certain tingle growing in her stomach. "What is it?" Yugogo looked at her, taking a deep breath. "Naruto is back in Konoha." There was a strong gust of wind, and Kushina was gone. As coincidence had it, Kushina and Kakashi arrived in front of the Hokage's office at the same time. Kakashi looked at the secretary. "Is the Hokage in his office?" The secretary, having a feeling of déjà vu, simply nodded. Kakashi and Kushina looked at each other, before Kakashi made a sidestep. "Ladies first." Kushina gave him a smile. "Why thank you?" She raised her leg, and kicked the door in. Sarutobi looked up, and sighed. "I've been expecting you too." Kushina stared at him. "Is it true? Is he back?" She had to restrain herself to not grab the old man by the collar, and shake the answer out of him. Sarutobi sighed again. "That's the problem, we're not sure." Kakashi summed their thoughts up. "What?" Sarutobi scratched his head. "You see, the boy literally dropped from the ceiling and onto my desk. Personally, I have no doubt that it's Naruto, but to be sure, I ordered a genetic comparison, and the results are confusing, to say the least." Kushina looked at him. "How so?" Sarutobi shrugged. "I can only repeat what the doctor told me, but according to him, the DNA of the boy that landed on my desk has many matches with Naruto's DNA, but there are large patches that don't fit. According to the doctor, one of them seems to belong to Itachi, the others have no matches with anyone in Konoha, so I'm really stumped. Also, while the boy has a blue eye and blonde hair, albeit with multicolored strands, there are a few physical characteristics that don't match with the Naruto that vanished from Konoha. There is no seal on the boy's stomach, yet there are traces of Kyuubi's chakra in the boy's system." Kakashi looked at him. Pardon me, but did you say a blue eye? Does that mean he only has one eye? Sarutobi shook his head. You heard right, and the boy has 2 eyes. But his right eye is unlike anything I've ever seen before. There are Tomo like with the Sharingan, but too many, and the entire eye seems to consist of a pupil, the Tomo and ripples. Also, he has no right eyelid, so that eye is always open, and even while he was unconscious, it rolled around in the socket and looked at everything and everyone at least once. Also, his tan is most unusual. His left side is very pale, while the right side is very tanned. Curiously, the shift between those 2 colors is right in the center of his body and without merging. Like there is a line in the middle of his body, and once you go past the line, the color is different. The last facts are things that I personally have not observed, although it has been reported. The boy has mouths on his palms, and it seems that he can grow hard, sharp scales instantly, and let them sink back into his skin. Kushina's face remained unchanged. I want to see him. Sarutobi nodded. I was just about to head there, won't you accompany me? They nodded and signaled him to lead the way. They wanted to see Naruto. Naruto opened the eye that was still able to close. The ceiling was unfamiliar, which was good. It looked eerily similar to the one he was used to, which was bad. He tried to sit up, only to find himself strapped to the metal plate that they probably called his bed. Not in the mood for calling or